The young man realized something abruptly, causing him to plant his teeth firmly. Opposite him was an animal that also clenched its teeth. The young man clutched his sword very tightly in his hand. A huge monster that looked a bit like a wolf was walking towards the young man. In an instant, he jumped over the guy, and he in turn twisted back. The guy was very surprised, his eyes widened. And all because of the information he had gotten in his head about this thing. Standing in a fighting stance, the guy realized that based on the information he received, he was on a planet called Blue Star. His eyes were maximally narrowed as he tried to concentrate. Blue Star, the year 2200. Many spatial rifts appeared all over the world. Countless strong and ferocious monsters emerged from them. These monsters were so strong that they caused devastating damage to humans. While fighting them, some people discovered that they could absorb a mysterious substance dissociated in the air, life energy, to transform themselves and gain unusual strength. Such people were called warriors. With the help of warriors, people built bases in the wasteland to survive and fight monsters. In a past life, our hero died from a mob of zombies. Well, as soon as he opened his eyes, he found himself in that world full of martial artists and ferocious creatures. Immediately after he opened his eyes, very, very surprised. In front of him was a huge monster with the most terrifying teeth. The guy immediately started fighting this monster. From this creature comes a strong electric current. If our hero touches it, he will surely die. The guy tried his best to fight and survive, but something went wrong. The monster let go of the boy's sword, and the two men flew apart. The boy watched as the monster exploded. It was a sight that surprised the young man. That's why he froze with his mouth open. It turned out that the trees collapsed on the monster and thus crushed it. This was the young man's chance. And with his knife, he decided to attack his rival. But looking at his damaged knife, the young man was surprised that it didn't work, because a normal man is not able to stab him. And it was amazing how a few painless attacks had drained his strength, and now the monster stood before him again. He came to the conclusion that this body didn't have any cultivation talent. It even made him fearful that the original owner had also long since given up on himself. And frowning, he came to the conclusion that this was why he went into the forest with only a short blade, to say that for hunting was almost tantamount to suicide. At this time, a ferocious monster all swarming with lightning and as if changing its jaw was eager to kill the guy. The young man looked straight into the monster's mouth. He was very angry because he did not want to die and realized that once already took possession of the life of the body, here to take care that he lived well. While the monster flew at our hero, he analyzed it and came to the conclusion that the stomach is not covered with long hair. Also, the electric current does not cover the stomach, so this is his vulnerable place. That's where his life force is located. The boy realized that his life depended on the shock. In an instant, someone had blown this monster's brains out, not the young man. The boy just froze, unable to move. It was a long-haired and bold girl. She could have seemed a little bit deranged. Addressing the guy as Chumo, the girl ordered him to hurry up and get out of there. Meanwhile, Chumo looked at her and realized that she was the original owner's childhood sweetheart, and each of these girls were called Chun Shiwei. The young man felt as if he had an epiphany. He definitely remembered something. He remembered a moment when their parents had discussed that these two get along very well and wanted to even get them engaged. And then some time later, the blame girl had said that their parents had died while hunting. And from now on, the two of them would depend on each other for peace. The little girl held out some kind of organ to the boy, saying that she had heard from some people that some beasts had treasures that could change the human body. And she could hunt on her own, and would surely find a way to awaken the boy's powers. And the boy only brushed away what Chen Siwei was holding in his hand with his hand. The boy asked to stop pretending to care, after all. She was not his fiancée. Chupo continued to shout while standing with his back to the girl that if it wasn't for her parents calling him to hunt, then they would have been alive. She was at a loss. The guy didn't understand how the original owner could treat his fiancée, who had always thought of his well-being, like this. In an instant, something began to happen to the girl. She took hold of her head, and sweating thought that her body had spent too much energy during the previous hunt. The guy rushed to her aid and picking up her frail body, he inadvertently shouted her name. Looking at her, he thought that the girl must have gotten serious and early during the dangerous hunt. And as soon as she learned that the original owner had gone out hunting alone, without any treatment, she rushed to save him. And wondered if the girl was all right. And the girl looked tiredly at the young man and was surprised that he spoke to her for the first time in a long time. The girl jumped up and informed him that she was perfectly fine, but when the purple electric sable dies, it emits an odor that only its kin can smell. The guy this news came to a kind of horror. Chun Shiwei became in front of the guy filled with seriousness, said that he should leave there before his kin came to take revenge. But the guy, before he could jump up, he heard something and frightenedly asked what the sound was. Heading towards the young men were several of the same creatures they had fought before. They were all electrified and eager to kill the young men. The girl jumped up and ordered the guy to run away faster. Chen Siwei stood in a fighting stance. The creatures rained down on her. At one moment, there was a huge explosion. The girl was thrown back and blood flew out of her mouth. And the monsters flew in the opposite direction. The girl fell right into the arms of a young man who flew away with her. The guy was in a bit of pain, but it was nothing. Looking at the girl's body, the young man was afraid that she had lost consciousness. At this time, a ferocious animal was walking and watching. The boy was frightened by the ice soul. Most of all, he already knew how to proceed. After all, they surrounded the young people on all sides, holding the girl unconscious. And the guy at this time was frightened to realize that Chen Siwei's strength had already reached the level of a warrior. But even so, she was not even to these creatures. His body doesn't stand the slightest chance, but he's more afraid of dragging others down with him. Before he can be reborn, he dies again. But being angry at something unknown, the guy raised that there must be a way. He slowly began to stand up, leaning on the ground. But in an instant, he realized he was leaning on the dead body of an animal. And then a screen began to appear. The guy was frightened, trying to understand what it was. There was a sign in front of him that said the collection system was activated. In front of him was a sign that said Purple Electric Sable, a level 1 medium ferocious beast. Gathering is possible. But the guy, frightened, tried to understand what gathering, after all. It was the corpse of a purple electric sable. Countless of these sables flew at the young man, and he came to the conclusion that there was absolutely no time to study what popped up. And whatever it was, it couldn't be worse than the current situation. Well, the plaque popped up saying that the gathering had been successfully completed, and a secondary talent of the thunder attribute had been obtained, and an offer to use it. Naturally, the guy agreed. So he clicked on the sign, yes. In that instant, the guy was enveloped in lightning. He was glowing like a purple sable. The light was so bright and powerful that animals that came near him flew away. They fell with a clatter in every direction. Our hero stood there, still flashing lightning. But now he felt he had gotten the talent of perfection from the slain creature. Our hero stood with a small knife against the ferocious animals. Only now he had a superpower just like them. The young man narrowed his weapon with all his might. Even though it was small, only this time he was able to chop the heads of monsters with this knife. He was full of rage and hatred. Then, to his guilt, he raised his weapon and watched as it was enveloped in lightning. After killing a few predators, the guys noticed that the power was building up in his body. But how was that possible? It felt like there was no end to the animals. Surprised to look at his arm, the guy noticed that the pain from the wound seemed to have disappeared, and it was easier to move. The guy noticed that the creature's attacks were slowing down, and the fur was also no longer indestructible. He swung his weapon left and right with all his might, more specifically at the side of the animals. He could chop up those animals. Then he pulled himself back and realized he had to. He could defeat the beasts. He could protect Chun Shiwei. His eyes were filled with rage and hatred. The guy gathered all his emotions into a fist and headed towards the monsters. Only now he was modeling with lightning, not them. The young man with a shout and lightning began to chop all of them, only to see the heads of the creatures flying in different directions. Eventually he looked back, and out of his eyes was lightning too. In an instant, all the animals that flew at the young man were dead. Lightning came out of his eye. He realized, although he didn't know to what degree the power had reached after the talent fusion, but he had succeeded. The tablet appeared in front of him again, and he was surprised again. It said that the master's basic strength was 1,527 Jin. The increased strength of the Master Thunder attribute was equal to 3,089 Jin. The fellow was already quite satisfied. Observing the lightning of his palm, he raised that 3,000 Jin. You are already a middle-stage warrior's strength. And the talent of the Thunder attribute is truly terrifying. Looking at the ferocious monster, the guy realized that just by being reborn, the base strength had already reached 1,500 Jin. And looking at the screen raised that after using the Thunder power, it had more than doubled. The guy decided to measure his pulse, thus realized that he could feel that his body had become stronger after fusing the talent. It popped up on the screen that a target study was in progress. It went on to say that a target has been detected soon this month. Collection is possible. And next, it asked if our hero wished to continue gathering. Putting out his palm and smiling, The guy suggested that it was possible to collect several times per corpse, and now smiling more and flashing his eyes decided to agree. Happy Hero decided to continue collecting. Something began to happen to the animal bodies, and a pellet of some kind formed. This indicated that the collection was successful. The blood essence obtained was the blood essence of the purple electric sable. This essence was in our hero's hand, and he realized that it turned out to be the essence of the beast's blood. After all, it was essentially the essence of the beast itself. It's a good thing that can accelerate the speed of the body's rolling speed. Although it is only the lowest level, but it is the most suitable for him. The guy leaned towards the beast's head and decided to check what else he could take. On the screen, it said that the resource's targets are exhausted and can't be collected. You can only collect resources from one target per month. Combat skills, talents, builds, blood essence, and so on that the target possesses while alive can be collected. After reading this, our hero had a thought. Just one in a month. Even so, the purple electric sable is very weak, so he decided that he would choose the target more carefully next time. The boy walked towards the girl, who was apparently still unconscious. He took the girl in his arms and decided that he would take her home first. And as for the sables, since their resources were exhausted, it would be a good idea to harvest their meat. The girl was lying on the couch and seemed to be delirious. No, she was calling for Chumo. She was dreaming about the moment when they were attacked by the animals. The young man to make him leave, and from that, the response was shouting that he didn't need care. Both of them were furious, and after that, the animal pounced on the guy and began to gnaw. The girl watched the scene with horror. The young man's blood splashed on her face and she could only say his name. After that, she jumped up in a cold sweat and started screaming the young man's name. But immediately she picked herself up by the head. The young lady had a very bad headache. At this time, our hero came up with a plate and gently inquired if the girl was awake. The young man looked very attractive and good-natured. He said reverently that the soup was almost ready, so they could take a bite. The table was full of viands. Seeing this, the girl wondered if our hero had cooked this at all, and then asked how they got home. The young man carefully put a plate on the table, and after hearing a little indignant, and said that he got them out of there. But for now, it is worth dropping all the questions. It is worth eating first, because beast meat is very good for the body of a warrior. Listening to all this, the girl couldn't utter a word out of pleasant surprise. The guy wished a pleasant appetite. A while later, they sat at the dinner table without saying a word. The guy ate at both cheeks and realized that there was an awkward atmosphere, but what to say to her? The girl just bowed her head and remained silent. The guy worried, but still with a bowl of soup in his hand, began to say that the day before was very dangerous, but fortunately, passing experts saved them. The girl was picking at her plate and did not pay attention to the words of our hero. So he thought she didn't care at all. So he slowly began to get up from the table and said that since he was full, he would go to his room and asked her to remember to wash the dishes when she was done, and thought to himself that the girl did not like his presence. And after a little thought, she added that the meat of the beast would help heal the wounds faster, so he advised her to eat and not to be shy. The girl looked at the boy in surprise, but still kept silent. In fact, she looked very sad. She thought it was a dream. After all, for the first time in a long time, he had prepared something for her, and he was talking. But then a little while later, more sadness flashed in his eyes, and she thought that even if it was a dream, she would rather never wake up for the rest of her life. The young man slammed the door of the room shut. Afterward, he exhaled and leaned on the front door completely frustrated. He realized that the relationship between the original owner and Chen Siwei had reached the freezing point. They don't know how to deal with each other and don't immediately find common ground. But looking at the bloody pellet, he tried to remove such thoughts from his head, because in order to survive in the future, he can't rely on anyone but himself. After all, the most important thing at the moment is to improve his own strength. So he decided to first purify himself with the essence of the beast's blood. And with all his might, he stabbed the pellet into his chest. The boy screamed. Something started to happen to his face. Something began to spread down his neck. The young man screamed in pain. His veins were boiling all over his body. A red haze enveloped the boy. He was still on his knees and holding his chest. Then he opened one eye and smiled, thinking that this was all too sudden, because the effect of the beast blood essence on my blood was so unpleasant. Now he decided to focus on training to fully refine himself. 1 month later, the training room. It seemed like our hero lived there. But upon entering, our hero completely focused. Lightning suddenly struck from his eyes, and basically he became modeled with lightning. Our hero got into a fighting stance. He headed for the things that were right in front of him. Bang and collision. From the collision, a pile of dust mottled with lightning, but on the table standing vase with flowers remained unshaken. The flowers were still standing there, only a small petal from the flower had fallen. Our hero put up his palm to catch, and unhurriedly, the petal touched the palm of the young man's hands. The boy clenched it into a fist. He came to the conclusion that the attacking power wasn't bad, but controlling electricity required further practice. The essence of the beast's blood was completely purified and absorbed. Therefore, our hero was questioning everything with his current strength. A tablet appeared again, on which it was written that the calculation of combat values was underway. The master's basic strength is 2,134 Jin, and the increased strength of the master's thunder attribute is 4,198 Jin. Power surged through our hero's body. He realized that the base strength had increased by more than 600 Jin, and the meridians of his entire body had expanded greatly. He also realized that among them, the amplification brought by the beast blood essence alone was at least 400, which was not bad at all. He had been practicing hard all month, not counting his food and sleep, but now was not the time to relax. Besides his lower cultivation talent, there are warriors with more powerful talents, and those with these talents progressed at a speed he couldn't even imagine. The guy decided to take a shower. Standing under the water and grabbing his hair, Chuso realized that with a constant flow of beast blood excretion, he would definitely be able to enter the realm of warriors within half a year. Once again, the action takes place in the training room. This time, it was already a girl practicing. Her pulse was racing, so she leaned down to catch her breath. The screen showed the number 8,364. But what was the appointment? The girl looked in that direction with a kind of bewilderment. The figure she saw was spinning around in her head. She realized that there was still a month left before the hunting exam, and this strength was still not enough. She realized that a two-headed python was an average level 2 beast, and if she was going to defeat it, she should at least have a warrior level. On the other hand, a warrior must have at least 10,000 Jin. Glancing around, the girl angrily realized that she was very far from such a figure. There were some bubbles hovering around her. She once again recalled the dream where Chu Mo was being chewed on by a monster. The girl was corrupted by such memories and thoughts. Angry at herself for giving herself a slack, the girl jumped up and began to beat the pair. After all, she will definitely become a warrior and the best. The girl practiced tirelessly. In her head was the image of our hero, and mentally she asked him to wait. The heart of the legendary two-headed python can change the human body. The young lady intended to get it for our hero. The action will now take place in the commercial area of Luyang Security Base. The young man wandered among the stalls and heard exclamations about the lowest beast of the first level, the Shirai, the Earthling. On the other side, it was said that bronze-level arts were being sold for cheap. Our hero's attention was caught by a level 1 wolf chaser that was selling for only 3 million. The young man was walking surrounded by signs. Each person had a different purpose and our hero saw them. He thought it's mostly the corpses of level 1 beasts, but there's no point in collecting them. Their talent and body features are worse than what he has at the moment. Our hero needs at least a level 2 beast. At one moment, a crowd began to thicken in front of our guy. They were people who clearly wanted to mock the young man, and so they began to do so. At one point, the young men were pushed aside by an even more pompous guy. On his face was visible tattoo or scar. Paying attention to our hero, the guy teasing our hero asked if this is the man who has no talent or physique. After saying these words, the guy's eyes glittered angrily, and his smile said that his plan succeeded. To hurt the young man. Our hero also glared angrily at his interlocutor while saying his name in his mind. Joe Ki. This man's dogs, turning to our hero, tried to tell me why he was crying his eyes out. And then with a bear, they began to say that their brother Ki, a genius of their class. His strength has already reached the peak of the disciple level, and he has 6,000 Zinyi strength. And if Chen Siwei didn't stand up for our hero, he would have been kicked out of the academy already. And then added, if he has any shame, let him leave the girl alone. After all, she and their brother are perfect for each other. The guy stood over our hero and with a kind of anger tried to ask our hero whether there was any point in going there in search of animal materials. After all, he probably does not have the courage to take part in the hunt. And taking our hero by the collar, the scoundrel began to say that he would let him see something with his own eyes at the hunt. And leaning closer to his ear, the guy almost whispered, but still with a smirk, that our hero will see Chen Shiwei under him moaning. This was the last straw for our hero. From his eyes, the lightning began to hide again, and he wondered if the opponent was bored with life. The guy laughed out loud. He began to tell everyone that our hero is too much, and this is too much for someone who lives at the expense of the girl. His companion suggested to just forget about it all and not to bother with our hero. But the scoundrel, exhaling with anger and still standing with his back to our hero, advised him to come to the hunting exam in a month if he didn't chicken out. Our hero's eyes narrowed. He realized that this man wanted to kill him, so he decided to start preparing faster and gain an advantage. Our hero stood with his fists clenched and watched the guys leave. He realized that in order to deal with Joe Key, it was no longer possible to target second-level beasts. You need at least a third-level beast. Our hero walked to the shop where the paws of some creatures could be seen and thought that the levels of the whistles sold in the market were too low. He can't see the third level, the level he so desperately needs. The boy was staring pensively somewhere. After all, he really needed to think about a solution. Next to our hero, a crowd of guys were carrying on and shouting that the Swift Wind Squad was returning. And they had killed a level 3 beast, so it was necessary to look at them. It was an earth dragon tied to a huge cart. Some people speculated that it was raging north of the base. It was said that it had already reached the middle third level. Many warriors had been killed by him, and even some warlords had been eaten by him. Our hero looked at the people who had killed this beast, and tried to figure out if they were warriors in Swift Wind, though he realized how strong the guys were. After all, he could sense their aura from afar. Wind was able to overpower him. Their captain must have entered the middle warlord stage. One of the guys standing at the head of that beast spoke kindly. Really true. Their squad is very strong, and the captain is already at the middle stage of the warlord realm. He can hunt and kill third-level beasts. Right now, they are currently recruiting for the squad. Those who wish to join are required to be late-stage level drivers and above. Those with special attributes are willing to make an exception. Our hero stood and listened in the front row. There was a sign in front of him again. The guy was full of determination. The plaque had a target that stated that a medium level 3 Earth Dragon Beast. Gathering is possible, and the question, it is advisable for our hero to start gathering. The hero's eyes lit up and he smiled. He had found what he was looking for. Our hero stood behind the people. He was glad all of us what was happening. After all, the target of the month had been found. A lot of people were approaching the beast. Here, and a young man with a child came up frightened and asked the warrior, "Can I touch it?" Because for the first time sees the beasts of the third level. The guy laughingly said that of course you can touch it. Our hero was no less happy. After all, this was his chance. The guy reached out his hand to the beast, and from his hand began to pour out something golden, something like lightning. Those who saw what was happening froze. Our hero was forming a kind of sphere. In his hand was a golden sphere. This sphere had a strong life force, and it almost seeped into his skin. The young man was very protective of it, as if he was trying to hide it under his clothes so that no one would steal it or see it. At this time, people kept reaching their hands towards the monster. But the guy from the squad had faded for some reason. Something was happening to him too. A plaque appeared in one Korea that said that the dispute had been successfully completed. The average improved edition has been obtained, and then a question asking if our hero wanted to start the merge. The guy walked like he'd won the war. But he didn't wonder about the average enhanced physique. It's something that can fundamentally change the physique of ordinary people. And he's got it. Our hero with his bare torso was in the weight room. He was almost ready for the fusion. He had a sphere in his hand. That orb mesmerized him. He hoped that when he met a level 3 medium beast, it wouldn't let him down. In an instant, the guy slammed the sphere into his chest with all his might. The fusion began. Our hero's eyes narrowed with uncertainty. He started screaming again. Our hero was enveloped in yellow light. He was in so much pain that it was as if his bones were breaking. The guy was screaming with all his might. His fangs were even beginning to show. This sphere seemed to take possession of his body, and our hero obeyed. He felt a warm flow from his heart, and his bones feel like they're healing. Or rather, the damaged bone meridians are being repaired. And after the recovery, the body's strength increases. This repeats until the whole body is reborn. From the pupil of our hero came a bolt of lightning. The young man began to swing as if he were trying out his new body. After all, everything was different. Feelings, speed, and in principle, the body, as if it had no weight. The young man made a lightning-fast fist, so hard that his veins popped out. Our hero was ready to smash everything in his path, and that's exactly what he did. He struck with all his might at the armor he'd been training on. After the blow, he froze and found a pile of dust around him, but he still didn't move. The young man was happy. After all, improving one's physique was definitely worth it all. In just one punch, the strength exceeded 10 punches in the past. The physique is the foundation of improvement. A good talent really requires a good physique. A tablet appeared in front of him once again, on which the calculation of combat values was going on. The master's basic strength became 2,656 Jin, and the increased strength of the master's thunder attributes became 5,270 Jin. Our hero smiled with sweat. But he was happy about it, because the base strength had increased by 500. And the cultivation speed was so fast. If this continued, in a month's time, our hero was sure that his maximum strength would be comparable to that of a late-stage disciple. But when it comes time for the Academy's hunting trials, Joki won't kill him. Our hero will try to kill him first. And we're moving to the first Lujin Academy. This is the strongest warrior academy with the strongest and most numerous faculty. Students who excel in their studies are allowed to study here until the end of high school. If they do not pass the talent test to become warriors, they will be transferred to the 5th Academy. The Academy regularly holds hunting trials for students during which they will be evaluated on their performance and rewarded. Today is the day of the hunt trial. The guy we knew was waving his hands and pretending as if he was completely unimpressed with the way he was perceived by everyone around him. He was called the honored genius of the class. Peichon had reached the peak apprentice level in a short period of time. In a month, he was able to score 600 points. It seemed like he was about to be promoted to an elite class, but all this admiration was interrupted as the envious boys noticed our hero approaching them. Joki also looked back unhappily, showing with all his appearance that he was not particularly happy with what was happening. Absolutely everyone was whispering behind our hero's back. Someone said that he has no physical talents, and for him to participate in the hunt is tantamount to suicide. Some thought our hero had already been sent to the 5th Academy. Some thought he was still here because of his girlfriend, who helps him with everything. But our hero did not listen to these empty conversations and only confidently went to his goal. His gaze was fierce, and it seemed like 1,000 goosebumps were running through your body from that gaze. Joki saw our hero approaching him and decided to tease him by calling him trash who didn't deserve to be here. This didn't hurt our hero in the slightest, and he approached the offender with a confident look. Something is about to happen. And Joki only tried to piss off our hero, asking him provocative questions. Suddenly, some people came out of the car and all around began to say that it is worth calming down. To be more precise, the offender of our hero was told that the teachers came. Apparently, our hero was lucky, because now he received absolutely no damage. But everyone thought that he could not come out of this ordeal alive. And today was to decide his fate. The teachers got out of the military vehicle and they looked quite comical. One of them wore some ridiculous glasses, and the other looked like a dwarf. The man with the glasses shouted, got up, and went to his number. A military vehicle was parked in the courtyard of the academy, and the boys took turns getting into it. It looked like something was going to happen. Those cars that were already completely filled with students drove outside the academy. The car was moving at high speed, while the teacher was telling the students that their current goal was the wilderness outside the base. Everyone was completely shocked after all. They had never been in the wilderness before. And only warriors are allowed to hunt in the wilderness, but even warriors haven't always survived. And they're just kids who aren't really trained to fight. But the teachers didn't seem to care much. The gnome teacher said that they need not worry. After all, they were heading north of the city, where the Swift Wind Squad had hunted down the only ferocious beast of the 3rd-level Earth Dragon. The base then recruited over 10 hunter squads to clear it, killing all beasts above level 2 and opening a 20-mile radius hunting zone. Ruler ruled his points and began to further reassure the agitated boys. He said that the area was now only inhabited by level 1 beasts, which made the area an ideal place for the Academy's hunting trials. He advised those who are still afraid to take the test to get out of the car now. Judging from the looks on the boys' faces, they were all determined and ready for the harshest of tests. Looking at all this, the teacher decided to lay down the rules. Reward will be given to the first 3 places. Below the 3rd place, there will be no rewards. For the 3rd place, you can get a vial with the blood of the beast of the 1st level. For 2nd place, you can get 2 vials of level 2 beast blood. But for 1st place, you could get 3 vials, as well as a bronze level martial arts book. The last item of rewards made our hero very excited, as well as all those who were sitting around him. Everyone thought that the reward was too generous, and obviously only geniuses like Joe would be able to get close to them. But the teachers were too engrossed in the story. Teacher Dwarf took out a communication talisman and said that if someone was in danger, they should immediately crush it, and they would find them and help them. But this talisman does not allow them to rest. The Vedic territory is full of dangers, and the boys must always be careful. The teacher with glasses stood up with his arms crossed behind his back, apparently to show his superiority to everyone. This hunting trial lasts for 5 days, and you can only go out when you're done. Hearing all this, the guys who thought to finish it quickly were very disappointed. Joe twirled the communication talisman on his finger, showing that he was the strongest player here. It was only a matter of time before he received the 1st level award. He absolutely did not want to listen to anyone and did not see anyone as a valid opponent. Well, our hero didn't think so. His eyes were full of a spirit of confidence, and he realized that he had to take revenge on this upstart. He only realized that Joe was a threat to him, and so he must die. To get more points, Joe would go deeper into the forest, and then when the time came, it would be ideal to kill him. The car with the students began to stop and could be heard shouting in admiration about how beautiful it was. The teacher with glasses got out of the car and looking at his wristwatch stated the fact that the time for the test had come. Absolutely all the students began to warm up and think about how they were going to pass the test. Not a couple of seconds later, the test was announced, and all the students rushed forward with lightning speed. The one who ran ahead of everyone was, of course, Joe. The teachers were standing about how good this year's recruitment was. After all, there are indeed some good fighters this year. Well, and of course, as they thought Joe absolutely has no competitors in this class. Our hero got out of the car with a slight delay, and the teachers instantly began to discourage him from going into the forest. After all, the probability of ordinary people surviving in the wilderness is only 1%, but it seemed that now our hero absolutely no one would stop him. He very confidently, with a snide smirk on his face, told the teachers that he would definitely cope. The teacher with glasses was too surprised and realized that apparently there is something wrong with this guy. But the teacher dwarf, that in his opinion this test will be very exciting and most likely the last for our hero. Our hero was making his way among some ancient trees and thinking about the fact that life energy not only allows people to gain unusual abilities and miss their talents, it allows beasts and even plants to mutate and grow. But with danger, often comes opportunity hunter units such as Swift Wind Hunt in the wilderness in search of resources. Since he can't find Joe now, he might as well hunt wild beasts first to test his martial skills. But after all, he still hadn't met a single beast. At least he thought so, until a monster with ferocious blue eyes and a wide open mouth with long sharp fangs appeared from behind him. It turned around and its eyes lit up with blue flames. It was just an inferior beast of the 1st level, an iron spine dog that could do absolutely no harm to our hero. The guy easily jumped over it, leaving the animal absolutely no chance. The guy spun around the animal because the best way to hunt a beast with high attack speed and low stamina is to spin around it until it is exhausted. Our hero had gained energy and was ready to say goodbye to this animal. At least it seems to me that the creature has absolutely no chance of survival. Indeed, our hero summoned a column of violet energy from his hand, causing the animal to slam into the ground at a tremendous speed. The animal was lying on the ground with absolutely no signs of life, and its recently glowing blue eyes had faded away. After absorbing the beast's blood, our hero could possess over 6,000 strength points and thunder attribute abilities, which together were comparable to the level of a late-stage apprentice. Our hero leaned towards the defeated enemy and began to ponder. It was too wasteful to the collection system on a low-level beast. Therefore, he would rather use a method to collect the blood of a beast taught at the academy. But our hero's calmness didn't last for long at all. Behind him, a great many furious red eyes appeared, ready to attack him at any moment. But as if his back or some force was protecting our hero, but he felt this sudden attack and was ready to repel the attack. Our hero turned around with a fierce look and drew his blade. He thought that the monsters had arrived just in time. He let the monsters become his sharpening stone. All the creatures were flying apart in pieces in different directions. He was unstoppable, and the glow of his eyes could be seen from a kilometer away. He wiped out absolutely everyone without giving the monsters a chance. Evening was falling on the forest, and the trees were bathed in the golden sunlight. The snake fell to the ground with a crack, breaking. Our hero stood among the pile of slain monsters and reasoned that an average level 1 beast was a level 7 beast for him. He unpacked his device in which he stacked the blood flasks and let us know that he had collected 5 flasks of beast blood and that he had enough for today. He tipped 1 flask and began to drink it with his eyes closed. It seemed that all he had to do today was drink it and rest. In an instant, his body changed. It was enveloped in a blue glow, and his eyes lit up with a bright light. Beast blood is really good stuff. Last time it gave our hero 100 points of strength after he absorbed it. Too bad it can only be reused once every 3 days. It would be great if it could be used all the time, then the power surge would be unlimited. Our hero pondered for a while, but his thoughts were interrupted by a scream that asked for help. It made our brooding hero turn around. A classmate of our hero was running at full speed while shouting that he needed help because he was being chased by a giant berserk bear. The guy almost stumbled because he realized that he had little chance to save himself. At one point, he still fell, and it seemed that this creature is about to eat him, but so far we do not show it. That's when our hero got to thinking that the giant berserk bear of the highest first level isn't as dangerous as it seems. The Academy has it on record that wherever these bears roam, there is bound to be a pristine spiritual hive around them. The honey of the spiritual bees can shorten the digestive interval between consuming the blood of beasts, and that's really what our hero wants. And the guy who was running away from the bear was screaming his throat out and asking our hero not to use the bonding talisman, because the better to unite and kill the bear and then divide the honey of the spiritual bees. Only I think our hero does not need the help of this weakling. He's already serious about getting the honey of the spirit bees. That's what he's missing right now. This ferocious bear flew straight at our hero. It didn't take long for the beast to kill the man it had been chasing for so long. The young man stood and watched as the young man's dead body flew away. And at that moment, he realized that the man was his classmate. Our hero, a little angry shouting, began to ask the beast how dare he kill the man right in front of him. Chumo, full of determination, flew at the beast with the intention of cleaving it. Our hero began to attack the beast from all sides. Although the giant berserk bear is infinitely strong, in terms of strength, our hero is no match for it. You have to be careful with it, but you have to use electricity to wound its head and insides. So our hero began to attack from every possible angle, and in an instant, he thrust his weapon into its flesh. He began to slice along its torso. The beast was racked with lightning and a huge wound, but in an instant, the animal's eyes sparkled. The beast seemed to come alive again. It darted from side to side. Our hero hung on the animal with his weapon to the side of his arm. The guy realized that things were bad. As he glared at his opponent, he realized that the electricity and pain had only made him furious. Our hero bounced away and the animal began to wave and yell. Our hero tried to defend himself, but at some point he realized he couldn't dodge. The huge bear slammed the boy into the ground. The boy tried to get up and fell down. The bear's huge paw was already visible above our hero. He realized that in Barsik's mode, the attack power and speed increases, but he lacks speed. The frequency of his attacks is too low. If this continued, even if he stopped attacking, his physical strength wouldn't be able to withstand it. Before he could think about it, the dazed hero saw a huge shadow above him. The guy once again flew away to a great distance. At this moment, he began to sparkle with lightning. After all, you cannot go on like this any longer. First, we need to create an opportunity to interrupt his attack. The guy jumped up with lightning and decided to attack the eyes of the beast first. The beast roared in pain and tried to stop this torture. The bear with 2 hands tried to remove these lightning from his eyes. Our hero at this time flew at him with incredible speed. Now the guy needed to limit the beast's movements, so he flew at it with a plan. In an instant, he jabbed something right up to the beast. The beast howled in pain and surprise. The guy sparked with lightning. He was determined to do what he was doing. In an instant, the huge beast began to do something horrible. Blood spurted from the guy's mouth, and his eyes were very dilated. He didn't expect at all what was happening. The guy had already rolled his eyes and thought that it had become the end. His hands weakened and he began to let go of the weapon that was embedded in the flesh of the bear. The guy flew as if unconscious. It really seemed to him that this body could not withstand any more. and maybe this was the end of it. Something was happening in the human body. It was as if a drop had fallen into a puddle. All the veins of the young man's body began to show through, just like when he took the pellet. The boy slowly came to his senses because he could feel the blood of the beast. The blood that ran through his veins. The blood he'd been hunting for. Kneeling on his knees and holding his chest, the boy remembered the blood of the beasts he had collected. After all, the blood of Swire collected directly is not as common as the blood obtained from the collection system, so it is only now being absorbed. The body's strength is being established, and now it is unknown by whose hand the deer will be killed. Guys indeed already flaunted at full height a huge bear eager for the death of the hero. One moment, and he again sealed the young man into the ground with his strong blow. So hard that everything fell apart, but that was not to be. Our hero jumped up with his lightning bolts right into a pile of ashes and dust on the surprised bear. The young man called the animal a vile brat. He had already prepared a fist with lightning bolts to attack it. After hitting the beast's face with all his might, he shouted furiously for it to die immediately. Chumo was able to fell the huge beast with incredible ease. This was most likely due to his lightning bolts and endless hatred mixed with rage. At this time, all the birds flew away from such a noise. The young man took his bloody hand out of the body of the animal. At first glance, one could not believe that this hole in the body made our hero. But nevertheless, the beast lay dead, and our hero tried to catch his breath. With his mouth slightly open and staring into the distance, the guy realized that the beast of the first level is really strong, and a single blow is enough to make a man defenseless. But if it wasn't for the power of the beast's blood, the guy would have been dead long ago, and the moment the guy jumped off the beast, he realized that speed was crucial. Standing at the head of a huge, shaggy bear, the young man realized that if he could find a talent for the attribute of wind, he would be able to compensate for his shortcomings. It turns out our hero knocked out the eye of this monster. Fighting power, our hero can also raise to a higher level. In an instant, the young man became alert. He sensed something and clutched his knife tighter. He sensed a murderous aura. But looking up into the sky between the trees, he saw Joki flying towards him. In an instant, a young man appeared in front of our hero, and behind him, it was as if his souls separated from his body, which were glowing green in color. The guy stood alert and did not understand how so quickly, because everything happened like a flash. But the man stood and stared intently at our hero while smiling. Under a moment, the guy was very surprised, as if he realized a certain moment. Indeed, our hero realized that Joki possessed the attribute of wind. The moment Joki passed by the body of an acquaintance, he began to say with a kind of smirk that it was not without reason that he had sensed from afar that there was a lot of noise, and as it turned out, they had encountered a berserk bear. It seems that the bear and the apprentice died during the fight, and later said that it seems he came in time, or our hero, like a piece of shit, could have gotten away with it. In an instant, he began to form a kind of sphere in his hand, and in principle, the guy began to glow and as if he was enveloped by the wind. Looking at our hero still with a smile, he told him that no matter how much he tried, it would all be to no avail. Especially the young man himself allowed him to find him. Looking back at his slain comrade, what it looks too pathetic, that guy faced a giant peach bear and fought him with all his might. And here was our hero taking advantage of its weakness to stealthily attack and kill it. And here he was, accidentally passing by and seeing our hero's cruelty, went into a rage and killed him. And then too slyly smiling and with a kind of mockery asked if he really that it would make a good story. Our hero just stood there and tried to restrain himself as best he could. After all, it was very annoying. But the rival just spread his hands and said that in fact, there was no deep grudge between them, and it was a pity, only that our hero was Chen Shiwei's fiancée. Only with her he was lucky, but with everything else is a misfortune, because our hero is a weakling. Boiling, Chumo lowered his head and gloomily began to say that his interlocutor was completely right. The guy with the tattoo tried to find out what our hero said, and then asked him if he thought that by agreeing with his words before his imminent death, he would pity our hero. And then said, like a cutoff, that there would be no such thing. Our hero, stroking his blade smilingly, began to say that it seems he has not quite understood correctly. After all, he means that there is really no deep resentment between them, but Chen Shiwei is his fiancée. And after gaining strength, the guy swooped down on his rival saying that he just had to ask him to die. Reacting quickly, the rival flew away for some distance trying to pick up on what was going on. for our hero began to spark with lightning again. In an instant, he claimed that the young man had a talent for the attribute of thunder, but tried to understand how he had been pretending to be a normal person all this time. Our hero, waving his blade and lightning, watched his opponent jumping from side to side with incredible speed. The guy assumed that this speed was an attribute of wind. At one moment, our hero's attention was caught by something and he froze. It was the opponent who unleashed a flurry of wind and a blade on our hero. Our hero froze in a position of surprise. In one chapter, it's as if he realized the significance of what was happening. He wouldn't have time to deflect. Countless blows flew at our hero, but he managed to dodge with his lightning. The young man was taken aback by this turn of events. After all, he did not expect that our hero would be able to pierce him with a wind blade. And at the moment when he collapsed, he realized that he could not withstand the attack of our hero. The guy began to fly in the air in an attempt to dodge the attacks. In an instant, he was hovering in a tree, trying to figure out how our hero was able to break his sky-destroying blade. And he dared to assume that our hero was at the late apprentice stage. And then getting angry, couldn't understand how a recognized trash who is unable to cultivate could do all this. It is impossible. The young man emerging from the smoke and dust very calmly replied to his rival that also what he sees might not be true. The guy began to maneuver his actions and ended up with many spheres. And then with rage, began to wonder if his opponent can return such an attack. After all, he had done special training on how to accurately control the talent of thunder, and that's where it came in handy. The guy jumped down from the tree, and as he froze in that position, he realized that such talent control surpassed even the level of a late apprentice. He was very surprised by our hero's action. All those attacks formed by our hero flew towards the blonde-haired young man. He tried to look still confident and said that even if our hero is a late-stage disciple, it's nothing compared to him. He has a talent for the wind attribute, and our hero will never hit him. But the young man still directed the formed spheres towards his opponent, who was trying to hide in the trees. Everything around him was flooded with purple light. In an instant, our hero approached, as if a certain monster with red glowing eyes, a villain, appeared. He smiled gloatingly and said that now he could hit our hero. Perhaps he would have succeeded, if the awkwardness of attention of our hero. He ducked, but still cheek a little for the cause. The guy started laughing feverishly, saying there was a chasm between them. A battle began between them. Our hero realized was right. No matter how high the power of the attack, it's useless if it can't hit the enemy. And with his opponent's speed, even if he only causes him a little injury every time, sooner or later he will crush our hero to death. And so the almost exhausted guy, with many injuries, realized that not only the speed, but also Joki's reflexes were unusually high. The talent of the wind attribute, and our hero is bound to obtain it at all costs. Closing his eyes and focusing on his thoughts, he realized that Joki's kill, no matter how he moved, was the last one. The strike would be right next to him. But then, its trajectory was possible to predict. The young man was still standing with his eyes closed, but he was already maneuvering his lightning bolts. He realized that the last time he had seen him was for 9 hours. Him like this about once every 6 to 6 seconds. Completely from what was happening, he realized that he understood all of this, based on the logic of his actions. And the next attack is coming right now. And the guy formed a lightning bow and drew the bowstring in the direction of his attack. He precisely released the arrow instead of where he thought the attack would be. The arrow was right in front of his opponent's face, who realized that there was nothing he could do. The arrow was right at his pupil. One instant, and it was lightning that struck our hero's opponent. He flew along with the arrow pouring out of his mouth all the blood. The guy fell with a rumble and with a hole in his chest. He shouted that this action and what is happening is not possible at all, and our hero exhaled in satisfaction, and thought that he had successfully anticipated the action. But it would be very bad if this man stood up. Well, the young man only managed to lean on the trunk of the tree. He looked too lousy, but still called our hero just trash. There was a kind of regret in his eyes. He did not understand how he managed to do such a thing. Looking at our hero who defeated his enemy, the man again tried to understand how he was able to lose to such trash like our hero. What am I on the powerless body of my enemy? This guy was yelling to our hero to wait for him when he got back. And then something came to him, and he wondered if our hero was going to kill him. The young man's sword began to spark with lightning. The enemy saw this and shouted that he couldn't kill him because his father was a late-stage warrior. And if he kills him, he won't let our hero go. The young man crushed his enemy with his foot and then in turn he put his arm around her and tearfully begged for mercy. He has with him something good to offer in exchange for life. But our hero just looked at the crouched young man with a kind and hatred, and even pity, and said that he was very noisy. Without blinking an eye, our hero cut the neck of his opponent with a lightning-fast blade. In an instant, a sign appeared in front of him, where his name was written and that the gathering was possible. And the question of whether our hero wished to begin this gathering. The young man still stood over the corpse of his former enemy. A certain yellow sphere was spinning in his fingers. The young man's face was far too pleased. Of course it was satisfied, because now the attribute of wind belonged to him. Our hero closed his eyes in a kind of amazement, and then in an instant his eyes opened very wide. Our hero was thrown from side to side, so much so that it was impossible to keep track. Our hero flew and was surprised by such speed. He was flying between the trees in a horizontal figure 8, so the hero was happy. His body seemed to merge with the wind. The speed was more than 3 times faster than before. Even the control and flexibility of his body had improved. It was as if he could walk along the tree trunks. Chumo couldn't calm down, so he tried every possible way to try out his strength. A yellow light enveloped his hands. He looked at his palm and realized that indeed, the wind attribute talent was very strong. But he also wondered what else could be gathered. A book appeared in his hand. Wondering about the skill. After all, the bronze-level combat skill of the sky-shattering blade. And was trying to figure out, could it be that the system could collect not only body talents, but also skills that the deceased and acquired while alive? Our hero pushed the newly formed sphere into his chest again. He realized that this gathering system was too powerful. The reward for first place in this trial was a bronze-level martial arts book. Our hero was slightly uneasy. He remembered his opponent who had maneuvered this talent. The sky-destroying blade has 3 levels. If you master the first one, you can cover the blade with a layer of light. And at the 3rd level, it is a solid blade of light. Then our hero relaxed his eyes a bit and didn't realize that Joki must have been at level 1 and his blade was only slightly glowing, but its power was considerable. If it was cultivated to level 3, the blade's attack range could reach 30 meters, which was not a bad skill. Under a moment, the blue screen appeared in front of our hero again. The guy definitely didn't expect to see it at this moment. On the screen appeared that it was discovered that the target of the dispute has a special item that can be collected. And the question, is it desirable for our hero to start collecting in options, yes or no? Looking at the body of his former rival, he began to wonder about the special item. And then it came to him, and he decided to collect, of course. A ribbon appeared saying that the collection was successful, and the treasure map was received. Past me the hero appeared a transparent golden ingot, which he immediately opened. It was a treasure map. The guy began to wonder if the spore system could even collect such things. He tossed the bar up to see what was hidden on the map. Our hero was very intrigued and was very much looking forward to what would follow. A few moments later, what he saw shocked our hero. The map showed the lair of the Earth Dragon, and next to it, a plaque said that 10,000-year-old spiritual remains had been found by the Earth Dragon Wolf. It seems there are other secret treasures there as well. Our hero opened his mouth in astonishment. He immediately visualized this dragon's lair. Those phrases were still rolling around in his head. He didn't understand how the treasure that was rumored to improve a warrior's physique was still missing. And he didn't think he would harvest such a treasure. So he decided that he would definitely visit this lair. Therefore, standing on one Kallen right above the body of the slain comrade, there was a sign in which our hero looked and realized that behind Joki is the Joe family, with which he now will not be able to compete. No one must find out that it was our hero who killed Joki. You've basically been there for quite some time. In an instant, he smiled like some kind of villain. He decided that once he got rid of his body, he would look for the honey of the spirit bees and then find a quiet place to cultivate. But before they do that, it is first necessary to see what else this person has with him, so that it won't go to waste. Sometime later, our hero did find the honey. Standing near the hive of spiritual bees, our hero delightedly put up his flask to collect the honey. Drop by drop, this golden honey dripped into our hero's flask. Later, our hero looked at the collected material with admiration. He realized that a hive of this size could only produce 250 grams of honey. He could keep it growing for no more than 10 days. The lad spread a kind of blanket in the clearing, on which all his found and collected paraphernalia was laid out. The guy realized that along with the honey of the spirit bees, he had collected 21 bottles of beast blood in a day, including 6 bottles from the peach bears, 8 bottles from the classmate he had killed, and 7 bottles of other beasts as well. But Strange had nothing on Joki's body except for a blade and a pouch. Taking the pouch in his hands, our hero realized with interest that the texture of this pouch did indeed slightly resemble the skin of a ferocious beast. Our hero remembered his opponent and realized that when he met Joki in this forest, he didn't have a blade at all. And where could he have gotten it from? And decided our hero to try to lead the life energy. Something very bright and blue lit up in his hand. This something formed something very incredibly beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The boy rushed back in surprise. Then he rejoiced that it was indeed a storage bag, as expected from the Zhou family. But something like this, even warlords usually can't afford. The guy tried to touch the contents. These were primary stones. Our hero used to be very poor, but now he had these primary stones poured in. There are at least 100 pieces of low-level primary stones, as well as 12 bottles of beast blood, 3 of which have reached the 2nd level. Their energy can be absorbed by warriors and used as currency by them. A primary stone, a special ore obtained after the Great Change of the World, powered by life energy. In an instant, the entire contents of this sphere began to form into a tiny little bundle. In the end, it really did all fit into a small little lump. Our hero grabbed this and was happy. He realized that this thing could not be put on display. Not many people in his small town could afford it, and now our hero began to open the flask with the collected honey. He decided it was time to try out the effects of the honey of the spiritual bees. In an instant, he began to drink it, and that hour it all began to spread through his body. It wasn't like the intense pain of absorbing the blood of a beast. It's like a warm stream running through his body, soothing every tiny wound. It was as if our hero had found harmony with his body. His eyes were closed with pleasure, and his mouth was slightly open. The guy seemed to hover somewhere in space, completely relaxed. Under a moment, he began to open little by little his bright blue eyes, and in an instant, they widened completely. Looking at his palms, the guy smilingly realized that just a small portion of the honey of the spirit bees and the blood of the beast, which would take 3 days to digest, could be completely digested in a few hours. If he had a constant supply of spirit bees, he would be able to consume unlimited amounts of beast blood. Then wary, but still smiling, the guy realized that it was necessary to continue to improve himself as much as possible. Then at dawn, our hero would go and explore the lair of the Earth Dragon. Chumo decided that according to the system, the Earth Dragon's lair is just ahead, or even underneath our hero. The guy immediately descended towards the entrance of the cave, assuming that the entrance was there. It looks like this place has already been thoroughly explored and cleaned. Most people would never think there was treasure there. The Zhou family is so powerful that they were able to hide the evidence right under the nose of the investigation team. Once inside, our hero realized that the cave was too deep, as he had been walking down for more than 10 minutes and still hadn't reached the end. At one point, the young man was very surprised because he received a notification about the right wall. He put his hand on the rock and tried to see if it was there. The fingers of our hero began to fall through a kind of portal. He could not understand whether it was a technique of concealment or a natural covering, especially did not expect that the system is able to notice hidden things from the eyes. A few seconds later, the guy fell into the unknown. He found himself in the middle of a cave, where in the middle of the drops falling from the ceiling knocked out a kind of reservoir, and in the air reigned a kind of matter. In front of the guy were 10,000-year-old remains. Trying to pick up one of the droplets, the hero tried to figure out what it was, and assumed that it was a byproduct of the spiritual remains. And indeed, lifting this droplet too close to his eyes, the young man remembered that he had heard that where the treasures of heaven and earth are born, there are accompanying spirits, so it should be put aside first and studied later. Our hero bent down to this body of water and tried to remember what the book said about how to use it. The guy immediately took off all his clothes and jumped the bomb. It was a strange feeling, very cloudy, sad, that they encapsulated the emotions in the life and death of beings on this earth for thousands of years, merging into some powerful force full of fighting energy, pouring into the guy's body, very heavy, bloody, but infinitely alive. Our hero's eyes became even more expressive, and it seemed that the guy himself became more determined. Sometime later, he was already climbing out of the pond, but in an instant, as if the pond itself pushed him out and threw him into the air. Being in space, the frightened guy tried to understand what it was. The guy emitting a green light realized that the attribute of wind completely embedded in his body, and therefore the young man almost does not feel his weight, and in this case, he decided to check other talents of physical data. But in this case, a system appeared in front of him, where it was indicated to check the properties of host. The guy glanced at the water, didn't realize that everything was happening as he expected. After all, last night he had drunk 4 bottles of beast blood, but it only increased his base strength by 500, and now the attributes of physique improvement and talent improvement were directly improved by 1 level. Spiritual remains are only effective when used for the first time, but it's better to collect some to spare, because the rest of it will be left there anyway, because it might be useful to others in the future. The young man tossed a flask of this magical water into the air. Our hero was happy, because there were 3 days left until the end of the test, so he will try to move to the next level before the end of the hunt. 3 days later, the group that had left these young men for the test was waiting for them at the truck. The men intended to summarize the results, and so ordered the men to line up. One of the men who handed out the backpacks began to say one by one who had how many points. The young people listened with incredible interest. But in a moment, they all started to protest, because they were sure that they had scored many times more points, and some of them were sure that they could take some place. People were discussing who was in what place, but they were sure that Joe Key was in first place, and he would come soon. But one of the guys heard a rustle behind him and turned around and was surprised. From the thicket of the forest came out of our hero. People began to repeat his name one after another. After all, none of them believed that our hero could really survive in the wilderness. Putting his briefcase on the table, the young man asked his teacher to look at his grades. The teachers looked in his briefcase and were surprised. And the man with glasses was speechless for a while. On the table was an incredible number of items, and the man who voiced the number of points said that our hero has only 103 points. It was more than anyone else, of course. No one could not believe it. And a second later, the man in glasses, paying attention to his wristwatch, shouted loudly that the time was up and the hunting test was over. The 2 guys couldn't figure out where Juki had gone. They didn't want to believe that the guy could have gotten into trouble, and then assumed that our hero was collecting the leftovers after their buddy. At one point, a man with glasses, a little trembling and worried, asked our hero if he had not met Joki in the jungle, to which our hero categorically washed his head. But the man was in no hurry to believe our hero, so he ordered him to immediately answer, where did he get all the animal materials? The young man was wary and already more harshly replied that he had them because he hunted all the animals himself. The glasses-wearing man's colleague took him by one shoulder and asked him to calm down, saying that it went without saying that Joki was very sorry, but Chumo wouldn't be able to kill him with his own strength. The man seemed to exhale slightly, but remained to be as stern as possible. He realized that his colleague was right. So in that case, the man announced that the first place in this hunting challenge was our hero. By himself, he was happy. The people around him were indignant. The guys were standing by the van. They were told that the reward for the trial would be handed over to the academy, because there was a danger that could kill Joe Key, so they could not stay there for long. The guys were ordered to get into the car. At the moment when our hero climbed into the van, he was called out by the teacher. Of course, the young man was a little surprised, and the teacher sternly, looking at our hero, said that Joe Key dead, and our hero has so much loot, and asked the guy whether he realizes that the family of the killed guy will not believe that he was not involved in the death, and then advised, after receiving the award, immediately go home, and it would be even better if our hero will not go out for a while. Zhou family home in Luyang Base. The head of the Zhou family, Zhou Cheng, wondered whether it was true that his son had fallen in the hunting test of a simple academy, and furthermore not found a corpse. The Zhou family's early-stage warrior master was incredibly worried, and said that it was actually true. The young master's body had not been found. Perhaps he had been devoured by a ferocious beast. But the strangest thing was that the first place was taken by a worthless man who could not cultivate and had clashes with the young master because of a woman. The head of the family, hearing about the good-for-nothing man, seemed to make him furious, and even more so when he took first place. It made the man squeeze the beast's head as hard as he could. The man who was telling the Golava about what had happened bent over the dead animal and asked the gentleman to calm down. The man looked at the dead animal with his crazy eyes and ordered our hero to be brought to him, because there is a demon lurking in everything abnormal. And he thought that if all this is really connected to our child, then the secret treasure that he asked to find his son should also be in his hands. We will now move to one of the many apartments. A girl came inside with a bag and said she was back. The girl was surprised to realize that no one was home. Since that day, the young man cooks food every day. It is as if he is a completely different person. Just thought looking at the table with food. After all, she decided to practice before the meal. The trouble of the Academy's hunting test is only 1 month away, and she must reach the warrior realm, take the first place, and get the heart of the two-headed python. In an instant, something caught this young lady's attention. In front of her was a structure that had been mutilated. She thought about it for a while and came to the conclusion that it looked like a trace after an electric current, and tried to understand when she had time to do it all. And now the action was taking place in an abandoned area outside the base. A quick calculation of combat values was taking place. Our hero, looking at it, realized that it had been almost a month since he had returned from the hunting trial, and on the 15th day, his base strength had risen to 9,900 jin, and to the warrior realm was nothing, but there had been no improvement for the past 10 days. It seems that our hero had already reached the peak apprentice peak and had a narrow space to traverse to reach the warrior realm, so it was necessary to practice using this technique for a change. After all, the reward for an armor-level technique is Luo Yan's step, ordered himself to concentrate most of his energy on his legs and disperse the rest throughout his body. Our hero began to dash from side to side as if he had no control over himself. But in an instant, something unpleasant happened. The young man twisted his leg, and naturally the guy lost his balance. But at the moment of the fall, he thought about the fact that you need to not only control his vital energy, but also to watch his breathing, the movement of the whole body. Even the heartbeat is accelerated, and a normal driver probably should not use it. However, now that the young man had the talent of wind attributes, it was as if this movement technique was tailor-made for him. Besides, the young man had found a little trick. A second later, the young man flew off, and it was as if he had never been there. The young man seemed to be flying in the building as he thought about the fact that Luo Yan's move was a bronze-level movement technique that was truly extraordinary. Therefore, our hero did not intend to stop his training, and so continued to fly among the abandoned rooms. After a period of time, he stopped and exhaled, thinking that for the moment it is enough and it is time to go home. But in a moment, something attracted him and he became alert. A man landed right next to him, and of course our hero asked him who he was. The man did not look at all disposed to himself. He immediately asked our hero's name, told everyone that his master invited him to the banquet to talk, and asked him not to neglect the invitation. But the young man was also not stupid, so he replied that he does not know this gentleman and does not want to know, and then asked to put alone. The man did not like the answer at all and replied that his master is Zhou Cheng. He is an enriched late-stage warrior. Perhaps in the future he can become a warlord and is an influential person in the entire Luyang base. Our hero's imagination immediately gave out the image of Zhou Qi and immediately guessed what was the point. So gathering courage, the young man replied that if the gentleman appeared there in person, he might think about it and ask the man who he was. The man completely lost his mind, so flew at our hero with an incredible amount of insults and threats. At the moment when the man's hand seemed to touch our hero's flesh, the body seemed to dissolve. But then it slowly began to dawn on the man what was going on. But he couldn't believe that our hero was able to cultivate. The man's pupils narrowed to an incredibly small size, and all of this happened because he noticed, in our hero's hands, the young lord's sword. The man was furious, because his lord was not mistaken. The death of his son really had something to do with our hero. He tried to attack him time after time, and the young man was able to dodge time after time. The henchman of the Zheng family was incredibly puzzled to see that our hero could move at incredible speeds and hover in the air. But what amazed him the most was that our hero was late with the sky-destroying blade talent. The guy smirked and displayed a level 1 sky-destroying blade. The man stood up and flamed up in the lotus posture. Everything that was happening appeared to be very outrageous to him, and our hero was in no hurry to disturb his opponent. The man transformed a little and flew straight at the guy. Behind his back was the fiery shadow of some incredibly strong bird. The man wondered how the guy knows the technique of driving the sword of the young master, and then used the attack of the fire vulture. Our hero decided to slow down and resist the attack, so he decided to let the man personally ask the young lord anything he was interested in. The henchman was incredibly surprised, because our hero had the same wind attribute talent as the young lord, but did not understand how he could have a technique stronger than the previous lord. Thus began the fight between the fiery man and our hero. The henchman tried to suppress the barrier created, but he had little success. Chumo understood and knew everything at the early stage of the warrior and the fire attribute. She realized that at best it was all inferior. The guy's talent had reached the highest level, and his physique was even higher, so he had nothing to fear. At this time, the henchman tried with all his might to get to our hero, and because of his failures was incredibly angry. It seemed that fire and water were fighting, and through the fire, the man ordered our hero to appear in front of him, or he would see him break through the undead wave of our hero. The man was right at our hero's head. His hatred seemed to have absolutely no limit, but the guy stood perfectly still. But in an instant, the guy smiled and began to sparkle with lightning, because he finally waited for the right moment. Now he was like a real villain. Our hero shoved his lightning-sparkling palm right in the man's face. He was even more surprised to learn that the guy has the attribute of thunder. Our hero was like a real god of thunder and lightning. He slammed his opponent right into the concrete surface, crushing everything in his path. Absolutely everything around the abandoned building was sparkling with lightning. A moment later, the young man stopped when he saw that his opponent was lying dead. At the early stage of a warrior, there was no point in parrying in front of him. After all, his current strength should be comparable to that of a middle-stage warrior or even a late-stage warrior. But there was one thing. Zhou Chung has already targeted our hero, and it is very pleasant that he will attack him personally. After all, he has already been at the late stage of the warrior realm for many years, so most likely our hero is not his opponent yet. The young man looked at the month and thought that he would like to move from apprentice to warrior realm as soon as possible. Then, he looked mysteriously into the distance and thought that he might be able to expand the boundaries of the realm if he went into the wilderness. And our events moved to the warrior supply hall, a mandatory place for drivers before they go hunting. Warriors trade materials and information here, and can also accept assignments from the government or individuals for rewards. Our hero decided to walk around this place in order to find items that will help him when training in the wilderness. His choice was Jade House, one of the best stores in the place. He was met by a very nice and smiling girl who immediately offered to help him, which the guy did not want to refuse and told her that he needed items for survival in the wilderness. And this store did indeed carry all the items a guy might need. The guy turned around and pointed out to the girl the items he needed to pick up and offered her 600 rocks. Meanwhile, a pretty girl with pink hair was pestering one of the warriors and begging him to help her with her question, because she really wanted to kill the second-level two-headed python. However, no one agreed because they all realized that it was tantamount to death. It turns out that the girl needed the heart of the two-headed python, because only it can help her mother heal. The boy thought, he must help. The middle beast with his current strength is not so dangerous for him. He would help and heaven help him. He approached the humble little girl to make sure the task was still on. The girl looked at him with her naive blue eyes. She didn't believe that someone was willing to help her. Our hero patted her beautiful pink hair and said that she should go home to her mother and he would take care of everything. People were puzzled. There's a hero with this level of strength. Could he really defeat a two-headed python? The beautiful mistress, in a beautiful green suit, was watching everything that was going on. She liked this brave young man very much. And she liked brave guys, so she looked at him in love. 2 days passed and we moved to the wild territory of Mount Tashu. This is a relatively safe area in which they also conduct regular tests of students of the base. Our hero scurried from tree to tree, looking for his opponent. He needed to train. The second-level beast was an iron mantis. He had fought several dozen in half a day, and the effect of the training was obvious. Due to the concentrated consumption of Arena's blood and heavenly treasures, the fragile wind power was becoming stronger and stronger. Sky-destroying blade has broken through to the second level, and our hero is getting more and more prepared for the battle with the main boss with every passing second. He promised himself that as soon as he breaks through to the realm of the warrior, he will start looking for the two-headed python. And with the first academy, something was going on with today's meeting is the announcement of the start of the academy's main trials. Even the dean is said to be coming. All the students have gathered to see it for themselves. The formidable man calmed everyone down and said that this time the student hunt trials would be different from past years. The stern dean assured them that this year, the base would join forces with another base to hold dual trials, available not only to the students of the first academy, but also to other academy martial arts schools. So now, the competition would be very high and the dual trials would be much more difficult, which scared the students a lot. The green-eyed dean assured them that they would definitely be able to cope, but if someone was not confident in their abilities, they could refuse the test, because it was really very dangerous. In front of the guys appeared a projection of all the items they could get. The dean said that the top 10 teams or individual participants would be awarded prizes, including martial arts skill storage bags, beast blood, and primary stones. The guys were very intrigued, because it was not every day that they could test themselves on level 3 and 4 beasts and get such important rewards. Beauty thought about the fact that 3 days ago she had successfully entered the warrior realm, and her strength had increased a lot. In this trial, she would definitely enter the top 10, and at the same time, she would kill a python in the head to help the girl. Fucking off noble thoughts, she was distracted by the confusion that was going on near the academy. This turmoil was caused by the base genius who came here to win. He was ready to take absolutely all the items. Guys who came with him assure that he is blessed not to write, and his talent is not available to absolutely no one. An argument began between the participants of the bases, which was to be decided at the test. Who would win? Who would take absolutely all the prizes? But the rival decided to act sneakily and make a surprise attack. Puffs of smoke began to spread across the area, and when it all dissipated, we saw our beauty, who was telling this brazen man that fighting is forbidden in the academy. She was able to prevent his attack with her bare hands, but the guy in turn was very excited. He did not know that the academy has such beauties. One of the teachers ordered them to calm down and prepare to leave immediately. Their dispute will be resolved at the test, and a cheeky red-haired guy will definitely show what he can do. 3 days had passed, and a great battle was taking place on the mountain. Our hero stood surrounded by monsters and continued, because he needed to pump up his level. He drank the blood of the beasts in huge quantities and felt something inexplicable. He heard the sound of thunder, a sound that rumbles throughout his body. It means he is close to a breakthrough. When the beasts see him like this, they think he's the perfect prey for them. They attack with renewed vigor. But the moment he breaks through the barrier of the warrior realm, his body builds up energy that he can't get rid of on his own, so he needs the beasts. With a new dose of strength, he rushed into the crowd again. His fierce gaze showed that he was not going to give up. The beasts shattered into small pieces, violet energy slicing through the air. Our hero felt himself being filled with vital energy. A huge column of violet energy cut the sky into small pieces. The mountain was glowing. The guy stood surrounded by the bodies of his enemies and realized that now his level had increased to the highest possible level. Everything unnecessary was leaving his body, and everything necessary was filling it. There was a calculation of the combat values, and the guy saw huge numbers. He realized that he had finally surpassed the 10,000 point base strength limit and had become a warrior. And after attaching the attributes of thunder and wind, he could still fight opponents at the middle warrior stage. Now he has one single unfulfilled mission left. He must help this poor little girl save her mom. To do so, he was on his way to the habitat of the two-headed python, practicing at the same time, but he didn't expect to meet it much sooner. 2 pairs of blood-red eyes glowing from the bushes. The boy was ready to take this fight. He had already drawn his sword. The creature was huge in size, and up close the eyes seemed even more hellish. Our hero didn't even believe that he could defeat this second-level beast. But he had no choice but to ask if it was really a huge mid-level creature. It didn't matter at all, as the beast rushed towards the guy, sticking out its ugly blue tongue. One head was distracting, and the second was ready to attack at any moment when our hero loses vigilance. But the python had absolutely no idea who he was fighting. After all, our guy is now one of the best warriors. There's just one thing he failed to take into account. The python emits an aura of poisonous mist around him that paralyzes humans. Both heads of the python work absolutely synchronously. Each attack forces our hero to move in the direction of the other head, and he can't let himself be caught off guard point, therefore. He is obliged to move every second and try to strike. In 1 second, the python managed to rip off part of his shirt. Yes, our hero was lucky, because in place of the shirt could have been his hand. The creature made pathetic attempts to catch up to the super-fast runner. The guy began to concentrate his energy in his body. You see, he realized that he cannot move faster. It will take all his energy. Now he should not dodge. He must concentrate all his energy in his legs and use the residual energy received during the breakthrough in the realm of the warrior to use the second level of skills. Except the creature didn't really care about that. The two-headed snake continued to attack. At one point, it struck its head on the ground for a second, and our hero would not have had time to dodge. How scary was this python? Its scales were armored and its fangs were huge in size. Strangely enough, this did not prevent him from losing one of his heads in an instant. It was our hero who took advantage of the moment and split the beast's body in two. The beast roared with rage. His eyes glowed with a devilish light. He shook his remaining head in different directions, trying to calm the wild pain. And our hero just made a lucky bet of concentrating all his strength to break through to the second level. The speed of the flash has almost doubled, so that the vision of the python does not even have time to catch it. Our hero is now practically invisible to it, dodging the creature's venomous attacks effortlessly. One more swing and it looks like the python won't have a second head left. And so it was. Our hero's speed left the creature no chance. The guy put his sword in the scabbard, realizing that he got off with a slight fright, and luckily there was a breakthrough that helped him deal with the beast. The snakes are for the girl's mission, and the bile is good for the body. With the python, you can collect 20 vials of animal blood, and it's great. The python's skin can be used as defense equipment. Our hero didn't fight in vain after all. One higher level 2 beast is worth 100 lower level 2 beasts. It's time for him to return and enter the warrior realm, because now he can get some techniques in the supply room. But right now, a sweet and beautiful girl needed his help very badly. After all, 2 wild dogs were chasing after her. The boy did not hesitate a second to rush to the rescue. A couple of swings of his sword, and the most dangerous creatures were divided into small pieces. The girl thanked her savior. She cried from fright and sat on the earth. The guy was not very pleased that a girl from the elite class was walking in those places where the higher creatures dwell. She warned our hero that now his love is in danger, he must save her. The guy grabbed the girl's wrist with furious force as if not believing her words at all. He did not believe her and looked at her with a wild animal gaze. Is she not lying? The girl holding the hand of our hero was trying to understand whether it was really that Chu Mo, who was constantly protected by Chen Siwei. Because the guy is not able to use strength. How then he was able to defeat a low beast of the 2nd level? And whether his strength is at the level of a late-stage warrior? Such questions were asked by the lady. And our hero was very shocked, for he thought that he had scared the girl. In the same instant, he bounced away and asked if the girl was all right or not. She timidly nodded, and then the guy asked what happened to the girl and Chen Shiwei. The young lady opened her eyes wide and said that this year, the Luyang and Changfeng bases had joined together to hold double trials on Mount Dashu, and she and Chen Siwei went together. And when they were gathering wind spirit grass, they were suddenly attacked by a pack of wolf herders. The girl dragged her and they managed to escape together, but she was captured. The guy hearing about the bases was a bit wary and asked her again. She went on to say, remembering everything in detail, Chen Siwei asked the girl to run to the other members of the elite class to help her, and she was injured as the girl was leaving. After that, tears started to come to her eyes and she asked our hero to rather ask her friend, saying that all this was happening about 10 miles to the southeast. The guy turned around and said that of course he would go, and ordered the girl to rest and go find the rest of the students of the elite class, and then threw the flask. In an instant, the guy took off from his seat and flew faster than the wind. The girl froze with the flask. She tried to understand what was happening, because she was very scared because of the wolf herders in Shuguan. But when she saw our hero, she felt relieved. The girl felt as if he would definitely be able to save her friend. At this time, Chen Shiwei had massacred absolutely everyone. The girl was very serious and angry. One of the guys turned to the girl and said that Luyang Base was a pile of garbage, and then pointed out that the girl had beaten up his guys well and praised them, and then suggested that she should follow him, because then a bright future would be waiting for her. The girl put out her fists. I would wind up my opponent a lowlife, who take advantage of people, using ferocious and beasts to attack stealthily, has nothing to do with genius. The man laughed loudly with his sharp teeth. But at that instant, the girls flew overhead preparing to strike. The guy's laughter immediately disappeared and incredibly harshly called the girl stubborn. A second later and the two had a battle. The guy intended to show the girl the gulf between them. One moment he hit some part of the young lady's body and some blood spurted out of her mouth. The shockwave was so strong that the young lady was thrown an incredible distance away. The girl was unable to resist and so she fell down. A moment later she tried to get up, but it was very weak because she received an incredible number of injuries. The guy standing in front of her smiled and asked her to look at herself because she looked so weak, and then said that he was sorry for the girl. All this was said with an incredible smirk and mockery. Later he offered her another chance to come to his side. The girl was furious. She had an incredible amount of bruises on her face, but all of this was incomparable to the hatred in her eyes. The girl was still silent. He said that ever since he had awakened his talent for the supreme ball techniques and taken the #1 position in the Changfeng base, no one had ever been able to reject him. So if the girl didn't want to do it, no one would force her to do it, because he would have no problem fulfilling her wish to retire. In the eyes of the girl was a reflection of the rival, but in her mind she could not accept the fact that it could end so sadly. So quickly resigning herself to her fate, she closed her eyes. The young man towered over the well-beaten girl. But just at that moment, our hero came up, sparking with lightning and ordering to take his hands off the innocent girl. A fierce fight probably ensued between the boys. The young man was shocked at the strength of his opponent. He couldn't stand still, so he slid backward. He tried to linger with his sword, but it was all in vain. The young man was bewildered by such speed and strength. After gaining a little strength and courage, the guy incredibly fiercely reported that he was at the middle stage of the warrior and wondered how our hero was able to push him away. And in general, Who is he, and where in Lujin such a person came from? With the back of our hero glowed the appearance of a dragon, and the hero himself asked to speak fewer words. The girl was almost losing consciousness thinking about the fact that the voice she had just heard was familiar to her. In front of her stood our hero trying to protect her flesh, the enemy of our hero. Incredibly angry, intended to kill our hero, because everything happening seemed impossible to him. At this time, the guy analyzed the opponent's abilities and came to the conclusion that the supreme art of ball possession and ice attribute is a good combination, so he decided to use Luo Yan's move, and then turned around and realized that Chen Siwei was behind him, and if he dodged, the young man would be hit. The young man began to swing his sword with incredible strength. The boy tried to protect the girl from the flying blocks of ice, but in an instant, the ice hit the girl's head. The guy was horrified to see the girl fall, and after seeing this, our hero became furious. He intended to kill the guy. So in a couple of seconds, the two merged in a sword fight. The enemy of our hero could not understand what was happening. Our hero is clearly not a late warrior, and his kingdom is maximally similar to his. And how can it be that our hero can kill him? In front of the young man's face was a lightning sparking sword. The guy was ready to accept his fate. So a second later, our hero slew his opponent, and he realized that with the talent collection system, everything is added to the base strength, so nothing is impossible. A bright, sparkling moon adorned the night sky, clothed with a bunch of stars, dark blue. The mountains were also sheltered by the light of the moon, on which the snow lay in a thin layer. The blue-eyed young man was wearing tattered robes after a long struggle with his opponent. After the fight was over, he exhaled a sigh of relief and put his sword away. Chu Mo took the white storage bag, which was more like a duffel bag, from the hero he had defeated, and scrutinized it carefully, intending to see what was inside. Nearby lay a defeated young man with red hair, death red on his face, and his hands unclasped the cold ground he was grasping at with his last strength. Chu Mo opened the bag and was pleasantly surprised, for the defeated man was indeed rich. He had at least tens of thousands of low-level primary stones and a great deal of ferocious beast materials. His gaze was graced by the bright light of the ice-like stones. Turning around, the hero spoke while looking at the wounded girl that this bag was more important to her, and so he should give it to her. The materials should help her get good results in the test. He also added that the body of Xu Guang, the defeated man, should be gotten rid of so that the wounded girl would not have any problems. So later, the hero would take the girl to a safe place and then find a quiet place for himself where he could gather his talents in peace. Having accomplished everything he had set out to do, the young man placed his hand on the body of the slain man and was now ready to draw his energy. The system indicated that the gathering had been successful, and he had obtained the ultimate art of swordsmanship, and the question arose as to whether he was ready to begin the fusion. The sun softly swaddled the trees and the lightly wobbly grass. The young man, newly empowered, practiced his skills at the edge of the forest. The hero was very inspired by the powers he had gained. He could feel the breath, rhythm, and even the aura of the sword, as if the sword in his hands was becoming alive. After a moment, Chu Mo heard rustling behind him. There seemed to be someone behind the tree and abruptly, dazedly turned his head. Rising above the ground and fluttering through the air, the young man wounded the animal with his now crudely living sword. He wounded the huge beast, which fell to the ground from a single blow before it could even attack and orient itself. The monster was lying on the ground, nailed and shrouded in ice. The thunder sword of wild, cold tribulation collected from Xu Guang was really useful. The ice attribute was not his talent, but was due to his sword skills, so it was worthy of the title of Chongfeng Base Genius. Not only was he talented in advanced sword skills, but he also possessed the thunder sword of wild, cold tribulation and even silver-level martial arts skills. Putting his hand on the slain beast, he was surprised because the system once again showed another combat skill, silver level. Thanks to the system of gathering and combining the two talents together with the basic strength, and he would be able to exert an influence far surpassing that of Xu Guang himself, the system updated the calculation of combat values. Now, the host's basic strength is 18,290 Jin. The increased strength of the attributes. Thunderwind, host 75,314. The host's property check said that the physique was high cultivation, the highest talent of sword wielding, also the highest talent of thunder attribute, the highest talent of wind attribute. The skills were Step Luo Yan, second level sky destroying blade bronze level, middle level thunder sword, wild cold sorrow, silver level, entry level. The hero was glad that the cultivation effect was good and it was time for him to return. and after looking at his worn sword that seemed to be making dying sounds already, he decided that it was time to go get a new one. Raising his head to the sky, he remembered the girl, saying it had been a month. She must have been waiting for him. A huge building rose up from which joyous heroes ran out. It was the warrior's supply room, where you could get new weapons for certain merits. In the recreation area, on a bench, sat a little girl who looked at every passerby, waiting for someone specific. With tears in her eyes, she looked back at the people who had entered the room. But it wasn't who she was expecting. It was just two girls having a heated discussion. From behind the girl came a man who addressed the little girl, saying that the one she was waiting for was not coming, and believed that he had long died in the jungle because the two-headed python is a medium-sized beast of the second level, and if it could be killed so easily, it would have been done long ago. And perhaps that man just lied and did not go anywhere. The girl's hands nervously clutched her skirt, and more tears accumulated in her eyes. She did not want to believe the words of the stranger, and worried that the promises were simply given. But a part of her soul still held hope, and if the guy did not return, then she dropped her hands, and the further actions of the little girl will not be known. Literally, after these words, a man enters the room. The people who saw the man who entered could not believe their eyes, for it was the guy who had fought the two-headed python. They were stunned and stood in a stupor with their eyes open. The hero approached the little girl, said hello, handed her a jar with its contents. Inside was the heart of a three-headed python in formalin. The young man joyfully informed the girl that he had been able to fulfill the promise he had made. The little girl was happy. Her cheeks poured pink color. She couldn't believe that the hero was able to fulfill his promise. A smile stretched on her face. The young man before the bottle with its contents into the girl's hands, the heart inside as if it was still pouring blood. Taking the jar, the girl was shocked. The heart looked like it was still in the beast's chest. Also, the eyes were burning brightly. The jar was interrupted by a man who doubted whether it was really the heart of a three-headed heart, saying that the little girl was not good at such things, and so began to examine it himself. But after a moment, he shouted loudly and inspiringly that yes, this was the snake heart of a two-headed python, and it wasn't an ordinary python, it was the snake heart of him specifically, which had reached the highest second level, also exclaiming that the girl's mom would be saved. In return for the heart, the girl handed the hero a box. Opening it, inside the hero saw an egg, which had a semblance of scales on it. It lay on a protective soft bedding. The young man took the box and went about his business, but the girl called out to him, asking him to wait, for she still had a question. The hero stopped and looked back at the little girl questioningly. The girl questioned why the hero had agreed to the task for the first time, and by agreeing to it, because he must have known what the egg was, which was the egg of a ferocious beast, and that it hadn't hatched in over a decade, and the thing was essentially useless. The young man only smiled slyly. It was noticeable that he had special plans for this thing. Turning around and waving his hand, the man merely pronounced that it was up to him, so he complied. Several heroes continued to stare stunned at the young man. It was amazing to them that the young fighter was able to kill a top second-level two-headed python in the wilderness, and that he was at least in the realm of a late warrior, also adding that they would welcome such a hunter on the team. The girl recalled moments in her life where she was left small and cried loudly, saying to herself that in today's world trust is a luxury, and that there are still people who can promise such things. Tears were still gathering in her excited eyes, but with joy. The hero wandered around looking at the shop windows. He was looking for a place where he could exchange all the hunting materials for primary stones and then buy a copy of the martial arts forging method belonging to the warrior kingdom. And he didn't understand whether it would be better to buy a ready-made sword or find someone who could forge it from the beast material. After all, the spine and scales of a python are good materials for forging. When he came across the Jade House, he knew that it had to be the biggest store in the supply hall, for it was rumored to have a powerful force behind it, surpassing the Luyang base. Once inside, the hero was greeted by a girl. She looked very friendly and pleasant, who said a nice hello and saying that she congratulated the warrior on his return and promotion. Also saying that in their Jade House, they sell goods for all tastes and colors at affordable prices. But the young man was very much surprised by something, and he scrutinized the woman. He now saw in the house's employee that it was not an ordinary salesman, but a master of the apprentice level, and having gained new abilities, he could finally say it confidently since he had reached the warrior level, realizing that things were not so simple in this Jade House. The hero was telling the salesman that this time he had come to sell a batch of materials and then buy something to improve, and was walking right behind the lady. The girl brought the young man to Lord Yan, telling the gray-haired man that a martial arts master had materials for sale, and he needed to buy materials for improvement. The man introduced himself to the buyer that he was the appraiser of this store, and would first appraise the materials the man brought to him, checking their quality. The young fighter put all his loot on the table in front of his grandfather. There were various flasks, skulls of bulls and monsters. There were also vertebrae and skins of beasts. After examining what the young man brought through the special magnifying glass, he said that there were really good second-level materials, wondering that all of this was obtained and hunted by a young man who didn't even look 20 years old, so it should be really appreciated. After counting all the materials, the gentleman said that he estimated the value of the materials to be 156,000 primary lower-grade stones, and whether he was willing to sell them. Sitting down on a chair, the young man told the man that he was now convinced that the Jade House's prices were indeed fair, and he also needed to purchase some training items and weapons, and wanted to know if the store had any suitable swords or forging. The gentleman handed the young fighter a list of what they had in their store. It was a huge book with a huge selection, also joking that if they didn't have something in their store, it wouldn't be found in the entire Lujin base. Looking at the assortment of the store, the hero's eyes were a bit stunned. A third-level alloy sword cost 100,000 stones, and the blood of a ferocious beast cost 200,000, and it seemed that he had earned enough, 150,000 stones. But despite that, he couldn't even afford to buy anything good. But there was no choice. The young man decided to buy the essentials: a third-level alloy sword, a copy of the martial arts forging method, and an encyclopedia of beasts and plants. After writing down everything that Chumo listed, Grandpa said that there were 172,000 primary stones due, so another 16,000 would need to be added. The men's conversation was interrupted by a newly entered girl who met the hero at the entrance to the store. Approaching the gray-haired colleague, the girl began to whisper something in his ear. After listening to what the young lady had brought him, the man stood up and told the warrior that he was invited to join their leader. This made the young man a little wary, for he did not know why the head of the house had decided to get to know him and decided to go and check on him, for he could find no reason to be apprehensive. Going up the stairs, the girl led the hero to the door and, turning around sweetly and kindly, said that their leader was already waiting inside, pointing with her hand to the door. Entering the room, the young man saw a lady sitting on a chair and standing next to the girl, an older woman. The old woman hospitably offered the warrior a seat. But what caught the young man's eye was not her offerings, but the 3 golden leaves on her clothes, because legend had it that in the Jade Business Alliance, golden bamboo leaves indicated the level of strength, which meant that this was no ordinary grandmother serving her mistress, but a true martial artist with 3 leaves. After carefully examining everything that surrounded the hero in the room, he decided that this girl mistress was not just a supervisor, because the martial artist himself behaves like this around her, obediently serving and following orders. After the young man sat down on the chair, the green-eyed girl introduced herself and said hello. She was Mo Shanshan from the Jade Business Alliance, and apologized if she had brought inconvenience by inviting him to her office. The young fighter was a little shocked that the lady knew his name and was probably making some inquiries, but he calmly replied that it was no big deal and asked what his purpose for being here was. The woman replied to the hero that she of course wished for him to join their alliance. She also said that she had indeed made inquiries, not with bad intentions, because she had previously noticed him helping a little girl in the warrior hall, and she was interested. And as far as she knew, Chumo had not previously given the impression of a person who could not improve, but he was able to handle the mission of killing a high-level 2-headed python, so he was at least a mid-level warrior, if not higher, and he must have talent. The hero's gaze was full of doubt and distrust towards Miss Mo. The woman told the young man not to worry because everyone has their secrets, and she doesn't want to know his secrets. Good heart, talent, and strength, no matter how you look at it, Mr. Chu is a genius. Out of respect and rapturous feeling for the hero's exploits, the woman gave him a round of applause. Madame Mo also added that the Alliance is always on the lookout for talented people, and the sword they can offer is a level 3 sword made from the blood bones of a level 3 beast, much better than the level 3 alloy sword he had chosen. A precious sword for a hero, and just right for him. The hero began to rise from his chair, with words of thanks that she appreciated his efforts. He was used to being free and not being bound, so he had no intention of entering into any alliance yet. But Miss Mo looked at the young man sweetly and told him not to rush to refuse. In this world, only weirdos don't want to be bound, and they certainly wouldn't force the one to join the Jade House, but they would still be able to cooperate without joining. The Jade House is a branch of the Jade Alliance which is headquartered in Jinling, thousands of miles away from Luoyang Base, and this power surpasses all the forces of Luoyang Base, and if Mr. Chu joins, they will allocate a certain amount of stones to him every month and give him special purchases and the right to jointly explore treasures, and he will also be able to use a 20% discount when buying any resources in the Trade Alliance. But the condition is to fulfill at least one task of the Union every year, and of course the young man has the right to change this task. The girl scratched her scales and looked at the boy slyly, hoping that after the above-mentioned advantages, he would agree. Carefully thinking over everything the girl had just offered him, Chumo was making up his mind after all. This affiliation, the Jade House that uses such methods to attract the talents it likes, even if it can't use them to its advantage, it can still build a good relationship and fulfill its needs. And the conditions, especially regarding purchases and the right to explore treasures, were really attractive. Without hurrying in making such an important decision, Mrs. Mo told the hero that he could take his time and think it over carefully, because there was no need to answer now. And as a welcome gift, purchases in their store would be free. And the sword that was intended for Chu, she hoped to be used for its intended purpose, and also gave it to him. Rejoicing at such a gift, the hero enthusiastically looked at the sword and asked if Manager Mo was afraid that he wouldn't agree after receiving such a marvelous weapon. Grinning, the lady said that she could afford to give such gifts and was confident that the young man would make the right choice. Chumo replied, while looking straight into the heroine's eyes, that looking at her generosity and benevolence, as well as such a tempting offer, he could not refuse and agreed to all the terms. Miss Mo and the master were watching the young man who had already left the Jade House. The old lady asked the woman. Although Chumo has a good heart, and the strength is not bad, he is only a rookie genius. And why would that one waste so much effort to hire him using even the leader's quota? Ta replied to Elder Zhou that as she already knew, one of the girl's dual talents is a special auxiliary talent, and from the moment Chumo entered the store, she sensed it and invited it to her. The woman felt a familiar aura emanating from the hero, assuming she and he were the same. The square of the first academy of Luoyang Base, after the end of the double trial, there was a man standing on the stage, and around was a huge crowd of heroes recently returned from the trial. Looking at the scoreboard, all the heroes were surprised that Chen Siwei had taken first place in the trial. It was also heard that the one who was ranked 5th, Guo Kun from the elite class, scored more points than the girl. It was also said that Guo Kun was injured when he was surrounded by Xu Guang and his men, to which it was replied that this young man was killed during the trial, but his body was never found. Chen Shiwei's first-place disciple Chen Shiwei was invited to the stage to receive an award. But the girl's thoughts were occupied with the fact that only thanks to Xu Guang's bag left behind by the person who saved her, she was able to get a grade. Otherwise, her results would only be enough for 3rd place at most. But she didn't find anyone on Mount Dashu and couldn't understand where everything had disappeared to. The girl standing next to her broke the winner from her thoughts with a tap of her elbow and told her to hurry up, because the dean was calling her. The dean was a manly and stern man. She once again repeated the request to rise and go on stage to receive the award. Chen Siwei began to hurriedly climb the stairs. The dean, in honor of the victory, gave the girl a sack with 10 bottles of 3rd-grade beast blood, and she could also choose any 2 bronze-level martial arts techniques in the Warrior Academy Pavilion. And in addition, she would be trained personally by the dean, and the resources given out every month would increase. All the heroes were very inspired by the girl and proud, saying that they never even doubted that she would be their first academy pride. Chen Siwei, as if she didn't care much about the reward and privileges, her head was only surrounded by thoughts of where Chu Mo was and why he didn't come. Abandoned areas outside of town, screams were heard from one of the houses. The entire area was surrounded by huge 6-eyed spiders with whiskers that resembled sharp blades. They seemed to be as big as huge dogs. Chu Mo had already used his new Thunder Sword of Wild Cold Tribulation in battle, trying to curb it rather. As he landed, the ground cracked and broke beneath his feet from the power of the weapon and the force of the hero's onslaught. Moving to the second stage of connecting with the sword, diving, the young man rose above the monster with 9 rows of teeth in its mouth. His face was frantic and his eyes screamed destruction. He raised his sword above him and was ready to strike. The crushing blow struck the monster deadly. The monster was enveloped by ice blocks rising upwards. The young man was using the sky-shattering blade technique. It was just perfect, and his combat skills were obviously growing along with his sword power. With a final blow to the monster, the fighter chopped it in 2, its guts and various pieces of its body flying in different directions. A blow of devastating force and power was brought into the wall, leaving a huge hole in it, through which, like a window, the beautiful views outside could be seen. The young man focused on his strength, pondering the fact that the Sword of Cold Sorrow had begun its plunge, and the sky-resolving blade had finally been perfected. The new weapon would double the power of his killing techniques, and if he were to meet Shu Guang now, he was sure that he would be able to kill the one with a single strike. Looking at his new weapon, the hero embraced a sense of incompleteness. It seemed to him that there was still something that he had not finished, that it was necessary to do something else. But he should have already mastered the art of the sword. Chu Mo's mind began to think that he probably hadn't practiced the body strengthening technique enough to refine it. Although the warrior level had been raised, he hadn't yet reached the next 3 stages of muscle and bone strengthening, blood purification, and ki gathering, which were described in the book as blood and bone refining. Putting out her hand, 2 tongues of great flames began to swirl around her. The young man made the decision that next he would focus on improving his body hardening, and training would begin from today. The hero trained using different martial arts techniques that would help him strengthen different parts of his body. One of his classes was boxing, which was very good for training stamina, agility, and punching power. There was also constant training with the sword to operate it even more skillfully in battles, and to feel its power at all times. And to reconnect mind and body, he used meditations to help calm the inner beast, train it, and find Zen with himself. After half a month, the young man began to really feel the changes. The life force was strengthening his bones and muscles. The feeling was truly indescribable. The hero's bones felt like they were on fire. The sensation even made him drop to his knees. All the impurities had been eliminated from Chu Mo's body. It was impossible to imagine that there would be such a big change after purification. Bulging spots appeared on his hands, looking like blood-filled veins. The young man looked at his hands, explaining that after tempering with the life force method, the rate of improvement had increased by more than 5 times compared to the basic body improvement methods. At this rate, and with his current body, he would be able to enter the top 3 warriors for this year. Delighted, the hero squeezed his hand and said that he was too slow after all. It had already been half a month since he had returned, and Zhou Cheng might have already noticed him. And even though he no longer feared him, but the decades of accumulation of the Zhou family had accumulated countless masters in the Luyang base, he was enthusiastic about his goals and capabilities. Zhou family estate, there was an elderly man standing on the balcony, and a man in a business suit and glasses approached behind him. A white dove landed on the arm of the gray-haired owner of the estate, looking for food. The man in the suit reported that they were able to locate Chu Mo, and the gentleman's eyes colored and glowed red. It was noticeable that he was hostile. Also, the snitch said that the man they were looking for had returned like half a month ago, but had been practicing in abandoned areas outside of town. He had just returned home and was discovered. The master frowned his eyebrows and replied that Chu Mo was a smart man. Last time Kei Nian returned, he thought he had warned the one to avoid the Zhou family. He continued his speech already with mockery, saying that in the end, the rare treasure was obtained by Zhou Qi himself, and hoped that he had time to master self-defense skills before they visited the one, mocking the hero's training. The man mercilessly squeezed the hand on which the pigeon sat and crushed the defenseless bird. Blood flowed down the hands of the ruthless freak. He ordered his ally to keep an eye on Chu Mo. The next time he went to the abandoned territory, he would do everything himself. The monster's eyes lit up and his face changed. He was mad and the lord was possessed by madness. Chu Mo's family, there was an ordinary doi on the street, unremarkable. The hero recalled the girl's words that the Jade Alliance warriors will be given the best assignments for training, where the formation of life force can double the speed of improvement he can use. It was another attractive condition, even though it is possible to fight wild beasts in the wilderness. But the effect of gathering or ki is not enough, so it is better for the hero to go to the warrior center and focus on training for a while. Tearing the young man away from his training camp, a girl entered the room. They were surprised to see each other and were very happy to see each other. Chu Mo had a warm regard for the girl and didn't hide it, and was madly excited to see her alive and unharmed. The girl was a little upset, having waited so long for him and him leaving so quickly without talking, without explaining himself. The hero carefully and protectively reassured the acquaintance that he will be back soon. He needs to stay in town for a while and everything is safe and it's for a couple of days, so that she doesn't worry. Before leaving, the hero also added that he heard that Tia was injured during the double challenge and asked to rest for a while at home, and did not forget to congratulate her on her first place. Something seemed suspicious to the girl. She looked back at the young man in amazement, thinking that he had reacted too normally, whether it was really her acquaintance. Jade House, a top-class training building. The roof of the building resembled samurai hats. It was indeed of imposing size, and a martial aura could be felt from it. The young man practiced diligently. The Thunder Sword Wild Cold Sorrow Silver Level martial art sword is powerful and ferocious, unrivaled in its pursuit of a deadly blade. The hero was now very confident to operate the sword, although he could control its coldness, but he still always feels that something was left unfinished. Chumo didn't understand what the reason could be. He assumed that the reason was because he wasn't using his life force well, and he wanted to use even more of his life force, trying to bring everything to perfection. Trying to squeeze out seemingly what was necessary, he still failed. He was starting to get angry, but he kept his hands up, trying to figure out what the problem was after all. The Thunder Sword of Wild Cold Sorrow, and judging by the name cold, is an independent attribute of ice, and thunder has no manifestations. And as for a silver level skill, it would be too difficult to carry two attributes. Finally, the hero defined his problem and determined the cause of failure, and it was all about the insanity of this martial art, not the attributes that come with the sword. Chumo was very confident and determined to make a successful attempt this time. When a swordsman uses his sword, he has the power to go forward, and no matter what obstacles are in front of him, he will cut them with his sword, and that is what madness is. And having given up his defenses, one is only left to use his sword without thinking of anything else. Displaying his truly special sword, the young man said that 1,000 swords are like one sword, and one sword is like 1,000 swords, and the only goal is to fight the enemy to the end. On the face of the hero was noticeable that he is a real fighter and warrior. Chumo's thoughts were brilliant. The brain gears in such moments were spinning faster than the planets around the sun. There are thousands of ways, but only the sword is invincible. After solving the riddle that was in front of him, after 1,000 hypotheses to solve the problem, he came to the right solutions. Striking again, the hero dealt very powerful damage that hit with incredible both speed and force. Outside, the bright and clear sky had been swept away by the murk. It was evening. The hero had just come out of the training room, satisfied that he was able to handle and curb his sword. Chumo passed two warriors standing like pillars with masks on their faces. The fighter, after a long observation of the house, asked his partner if she had noticed that the building was moving. But the girl replied that no, she hadn't noticed such a thing, only that there were magic circles inside and outside the building, and they were much more stable than a normal building. Suddenly, everyone was seized with horror. In front of their eyes, an entire building of the Jade House collapsed in 1 second. The fighter managed to hide his partner behind him, and they both quickly moved away from the crash site so that nothing would hit them. A bunch of caretakers were rushing from the alleyway to the crash site. They were in one voice outraged at who dared touch the house at all, who had lost their fear. The chief ordered to surround the hero and the fighters, and if they resist, then kill them. The young man stood calmly. Most likely he understood what caused the crash, and the girl from fright clung to his partner. He carefully calmed her. Unexpectedly for the hero, Mrs. Mo appeared from behind the backs of the men. She was very surprised to see him. The woman was also surprised at how the young man could master the skills of the residual sword energy and also practice them, because he wasn't even 20 years old yet, which once again confirmed the genius of the young hero. Chumo sincerely did not understand what kind of blade it was, and with a lost look, he asked the heroine this question. The girl was still thinking about the young man's singularity after all. He had studied at the academy as an ordinary person and had no sword skills at all, and how he was able to learn everything so quickly on his own. He really was stronger than she thought and should be included in the Jade Business Alliance, no matter what it cost her. The girl also broadcasted that if a warrior had such a talent of sword-wielding, he could improve into the corresponding realm. For example, as far as she knew, there are 3 realms of sword. The first realm is the lightsaber realm, where the blade has light, full power, and killing intent. The second realm of sword is the blade's shadow in the sky, unstoppable. The third realm of sword. When the sword comes out, there is no way for people to avoid it. Ordinary warriors can't even pull out the sword when faced with the intent. After the girl's words, the young man was able to sort out his thoughts. He thanked her for clarifying the situation, and after that, he pondered over what he had heard, and thus, the perfect level of the sky-destroying blade was the first level of the lightsaber. In such a short time, he was able to improve again, because he had acquired a high level of swordsmanship. Chumo also apologized to Miss Mo for being so engrossed in his training that he had destroyed such a sacred place, and the girl grinned, replying that if it would help him raise his sword power, it would be worth the cost of a whole building once he realized the sword power, but he still needed to strengthen his condition, and only a real battle would help him. The surrounding people were divided, some admiring the hero and his strength, and some scolding him for daring to joke with Mrs. Mo so brazenly. Leaving, the young man said goodbye to the leader and thanked her for the new news, and said he would do as she advised. Chu Mo was walking through the dark alleys. All his thoughts were only occupied by the girl's words about needing a real fight. And did he really need to go to Mount Dashu now? Passing the garbage cans, the hero heard some rustling behind him. The sounds were not like those of street cats or dogs, because he felt someone's gaze on him. Indeed, the hero was followed by the Lord's men, both of them dressed in formal suits. Chu Mo used his strength and turned into a whirlwind. The young men were dumbfounded by this outcome and had no idea where he had gone, fearing that they had missed him again. The young man moved behind the backs of his pursuers, already holding the newly curbed bloody sword in his hand. Purple, bright thunderbolts flared behind him, and his eyes turned white. Not even his pupils could be seen. The young man, without thinking long about the method of reprisal against his pursuers, swung his sword and left a bloody mark on the neck of one of them. When the second of them decided to twitch, the hero pinned him against the wall of the building by the neck in the same second, with such indescribable force that he was able to shake off all the dust from the dirty walls of the alleys. Chu Mo's face changed. Hostility enveloped him, and most likely he could already guess who sent these people to spy on him. But for accuracy and to confirm his hypotheses, fearfully asked what sent them after him. The young man's hands blocked the pursuer's breathing, panting. The man replied that he was sent by Zhou Cheng and asked the young man to spare him. The traitor confirmed Chu Mo's assumptions, and now the young man decides to get rid of the old man. Otherwise, not only he is in danger, but also his precious Chen Siwei. Thundering lightning discharges could be heard outside. The Zhou family's estate looked very powerful and eerie, with guards in business suits standing at every corner of the building. There were 2 guards strolling around the park within the manor, discussing that after young Master Zhou Qi died, the master was becoming more and more insecure, and the latter replied that it was all nonsense, as such behavior was normal, and no one rejoiced at the death of his son. Suddenly, something dragged the guard walking behind to the side, and the one walking in front was still talking to himself, unsuspecting, saying that judging by the weather, it was going to rain tonight. But suddenly, the guard was alerted to something, and he looked around in confusion, trying to find a single living soul. The moment the young man turned away, Chu Mo appeared behind him. He was like a black raven in the night, with glowing red eyes. A flash of lightning struck straight at the ground, layering into several dozen small discharges. The guard standing next to the building did not understand where the 2 had gone. Gone into the garden again, most likely, for he wanted to change the guard. Walking into the park, a security guard who was looking for his 2 co-workers found a whole bunch of dead guards. Standing in a stupor and gritting his teeth, he asked his half-dead ally what had happened to them. Behind the young guard, Chu Mo's bloody sword appeared, not intending to spare anyone serving in this manner. Inside the Zhou family's manor, there was a master sitting on a sofa upholstered in light-colored leather, whose arms were made of wood. The man's hands twitched a little nervously. He was worried why the guards he had sent out to scout still hadn't returned. Suddenly, a noise was heard outside the door, and the gentleman turned around fearfully and excitedly with an angry shout at him. Nervously opening the door, he didn't realize where everyone was. Maybe those had been dead for a long time. After opening the door without understanding the situation, the man shouted loudly at those in the hallway. But of the living, there was only one who had finished off everyone, and now thirsted for the blood of the Lord himself. Zhou Cheng was shocked, after all. So many people had been killed behind the wall, and he had only heard a small noise, and he tried to remember when such a strong young man had appeared behind the Luyang base. The young man turned on the Lord with a vengeful look, fury and fearlessness enveloping him. The man tried to settle the situation, and also to find out who the young man was. He asked if they knew each other, and why he did it, if they had nothing against each other, and how he dared to kill the people of the estate. Chu Mo smiled boldly and disdainfully, asking the old man if that Zhou Cheng was really the one, and how could he not be aware of the appearance of the one he was about to kill. The man was in mild shock that this little kid and Luyang base fighter was Chu Mo, his greatest enemy, whose death he should crave for so much. Screaming furiously, Zhou Cheng began to accuse the young man of killing Kei Nian a month ago. He had seen the body, but the kid had just become a warrior, and how dare he kill the Lord's men. The old man recalled his last moments with his precious son as he told him that there was a secret place in the Earth Dragon's lair, and there must be a secret treasure in it, and he was sure that there was a 1,000-year-old spiritual power, and the rest was yet to be explored. The Lord also remembered that his precious little son had had his secret treasure taken away by this child, and his eyes and heart filled with more pure rage and anger. The young man replied with a smile on his face that a secret treasure from a secret place could strengthen in a month, so it had to be his. After these words, the old man was horrified. His eyes became completely mad. Opening his hands, very sharp swords began to fly out from the space that appeared behind him with extraordinary speed. Chumo pondered that yes, Zhou Cheng was indeed very experienced in using his life force. It was befitting of a strong man who had been a warrior for many years. The man used his life energy to move his swords to increase the distance. But the young man was not so simple either. He leaned on his foot so that the floor beneath it broke into multiple fragments. A protective sphere formed beside Chumo, shielding him from the oncoming swords of the enemy. The old man didn't expect that the young man had reached a level where he could use his life force, but it was a possibility. He loomed over the hero, wanting to deliver a crushing blow with the words that he had spent all his strength to stop his five-pointed stars. The attacker unconditionally and unquestioningly tried to kill the young hero. The man once again struck at Chumo, but the man managed to dodge and the warrior missed. The young man quickly used his strength to move behind his opponent's back, because the best strike is a surprise strike. But the old man had too much combat experience to fall for such gypsy tricks, so he was easily able to stop the attack. Chumo used the technique of 1,000 swords like one, striking unstoppable blows at his target. Mr. Zhou Cheng tried his best to hold back the young man's attack, displaying his sword, all the blows coming at him. His teeth gritted and his jaws clenched. It looked like they were about to crumble. His face read displeasure and rage. All he could think about was that this kid was not beneath him, whether it was speed or life force control. The young man threw a punch that sent his opponent reeling backwards. Chumo left no choice for the Lord, and the latter decided to take extreme measures by pressing his secret button. A devastating fire blast erupted from the wall, knocking the hero to the ground with its wave, but also generally demolishing everything in its path. The hero flew from the top floor, following the pieces of the former wall, so powerful was the sneak attack. Chumo was able to land on his knees, breaking by sticking his sword into the ground. Such a turn was more than unexpected. The young man's eye was hurt after this attack. He clamped it shut in pain and silently wailed in pain. Mr. Zhou Cheng stood over the young fighter with a haughty look, looking at the one with disdain, and said mockingly, even if the one had increased his strength thanks to the secret treasure, but the one was still too young, and this territory was his. Did the little guy really think that the one would not have a backup plan? The young man was not going to retreat and give up, because the man used his tricks, which in no way related to martial arts. It was a sneaky method. So the hero was still, despite the injury, was confident in his strength. The master of the House Zhou thought he had defeated our hero, intended to send him underground and make him there to heap guilt on his son. And in a moment, several sharp blades were already flying towards our hero. A mere second later, the young man decided to apply floating light steps. The man was taken by surprise by the guy's behavior. But Chumo didn't wait for the counterattack and used the thunder talent. The guy aimed full force at his opponent's chin with all his might. The impact threw the man around pretty good. A little coming to his senses, the man immediately realized that our hero had not been wounded earlier. But after that, he got another hit. Our hero thought his opponent was a shameless scoundrel who thinks a guy would be defenseless against anyone. So without stopping for a second, the young man attacked the man again. And almost immediately, there was an explosion of incredible power. After that, our hero paused for a bit, watching the dust and parts of the landscape. The man was beyond furious. Yes, so much so that his eyes turned red in an instant. He tore off his outer clothing in a flash and asked our hero not to worry, for he was going to show why the warriors dared not mess with him at Luyang Base. After saying that, the man leapt out of his seat to show the power of the sky-shattering blade. The guy watching the man flying towards him assumed that the opponent was activating power outside his sphere, and this alienation after perfecting the sky-destroying blade, which meant it was time to test how much his power had grown. The Time Man did not understand why our hero was not hiding, because if his blade fell on him, he would die, even if his strength reached the level of a master. No matter what, he would definitely be able to pierce through his 10,000 blades, and if he missed a single strike, he wouldn't be able to do any damage. But our hero was already well on his way to taking the hit, and perhaps even attacking. The rogue's eyes widened incredibly when he realized that there was a barbarian resonance going on, which meant our hero was practicing the power of wielding a sword. As much as the man tried to attack the young man, he dodged with agility. The head of the Zhou family didn't even have time to think back before his face was sliced in half. And our hero was quite applied, watching the result of his actions. The man soon collapsed dead. Our hero realized that if Zhou Chengxian was dead, the family was destroyed. Some time passed and morning came. The head of the Luyang base law enforcement team was very surprised to see the man dead, because he thought that this man was impossible to defeat. At this time, one of the guards came up to him and informed the captain that the family's estate was all dead, and judging from the footprints, they had all been killed in one blow. The captain concluded that the assassin was a strong sword warrior that they would have to deal with, so they needed to gather information immediately and report upstairs for a decision. At this time, our hero was sitting on the bed counting his supplies received from Zhou Cheng. All the collected materials in total could be sold for millions. But this was not enough for our hero, and the next step was to continuously improve in order to raise the level as quickly as possible and reach the level of a warlord. Gathering all the material into a huge sheet bag, something that looked like a chest fell out. Picking up this Terra, our hero was glad he remembered this. When he opened it, the young man saw an egg that he thought was breathing. But the eggs of ordinary ferocious beasts hatch after 3 years at most. But he couldn't understand how it could happen that this egg was still intact. So the guy decided to try to open the egg with a drop of blood. After a while, everything in our hero's apartment began to wrap itself in lightning. Also, not long after, he had already collapsed without strength. It didn't matter. If this beast's egg was really that easy to make it hatch, it wouldn't have fallen into his hands, so it was better to practice. The guy decided to start with the wind spirit fruit that he collected last time on Mount Dashu. The wind spirit fruit allows martial artists who possess the wind attribute talent to obtain knowledge that could enhance their talent. The three-eyed eagle is a fast, ordinary beast of the first class, small in size, accustomed to hunting small, ferocious beasts at night, who in an instant was attacked by someone. It was our hero who broke out of his window. It was all due to sound, for after consuming the dog's 2 wind spirit fruits and half a month's improvement, and digesting, he finally exceeded the speed of sound. In a moment, a system appeared in front of him, which reported that the bronze level of the wind attribute had increased, and if he ran at full speed, his speed could exceed the speed of sound by 5 times, and this speed was almost the same as a martial arts warlord. After a while, our hero landed on one of the rooftops, but he couldn't stop, because after using the breakthrough attribute, just about everything wears a kick to the treacherous bones. The guy's body was mobilized, and in an instant, something truly terrible and yet beautiful began to happen to the young man. Everything was crumbling beneath his feet, and he was in a vortex of light. The base strength is 50,000 kin, and if you add the thunder attribute, it could reach 200,000 kin. The bone refinement was completed, and the next step was to refine the blood. Compared to the early stage bone improvement, the middle stage kui and blood improvement is very long and ordinary. This can stand still for several years, so the young man was wondering if the Jade House had a healing liquid that could accelerate the improvement of blood kini, so he decided to go and have a look at Dawn. When the girl working there was very surprised because every time she saw him, the guy's strength increased significantly, especially on many large bases, and few young men progressed at such a rate. The guy calmly replied that he had been practicing hard recently and had made some small progress, and this time he had come there because she wanted to know if the Jade House had a medicinal liquid that could accelerate the improvement of kui and blood. To which the lady replied that if he needed an elixir to purify his blood, it just so happened that she wanted to ask for his help, and the payment would be the cost of the elixir. The guy was intrigued and asked the leader to speak. After all, this was what was said earlier about the tasks that needed to be done for the Jade House. The girl began by saying that the Jade House that is in the Changfeng base accidentally got blood that she really needs, and she wants the item to be sent to Luyang base. But from Luyang base to Changfeng base is thousands of miles, and in the middle of the journey, there are several places where ferocious beasts congregate, so it would be good if he didn't have to go alone. Of course, for security reasons, they staff of the Jade House will send several warlords on this trip. This task is dangerous, but the reward is high. After completing the task, the memory can get 5 copies of the Horned Rhino Jade Liquid, and if the young man agrees, they will meet at the west gate of the base at 700 AM a few days later. The jade liquid produced by the single horn on the head of the ferocious beast of the 3rd level, Horned Rhinoceros, could accelerate the improvement of a warrior's kui and blood tenfold. The young man was willing to take the job. The Wind-Horned Rhinoceros is rare and hard to obtain, and the Jade House is willing to spend so much for the prize. So the task is not an easy one, but the guy will definitely get the Jade Liquid Horned Rhinoceros. 5 minutes later, our hero arrived at the western gate of the Lujin base as they had agreed. Looking at his team, the young man came to the conclusion that in terms of improvement level, all of the team members were at late or peak warrior level, and the strongest had reached warlord level, and this team was far from weak. Seeing our hero, the girl was quite pleased. She asked our hero to approach the rest of the team. The guy wanted to apologize for his tardiness, but it turned out they'd just arrived. In an instant, the young man noticed that Zhang Xuan was also there. This is the manager of the Luyang-based Jade House, Zhang Xuan. The guy has a medium ball improvement talent and a low metal talent. A voluntary rare warrior with 2 attributes, explained the girl, seeing the bewilderment of our hero. The manager approached the girl and began to joke that he was very glad that she came, but the lady in turn tried to introduce our hero as another member of the team. The guy tried to intimidate the girl by saying that not everyone could be a member of the team. He clearly wasn't the kind of do-gooder. Our hero also felt it, because the guy was specifically set against him. In an instant, someone clapped their hands and there was silence. It was a rather voluminous man, Qian Yuan. He is one of the managers of the Jade Trading Alliance, and he is now at the level of a warlord, so he is leading the operation. Many of the people present are newcomers who are participating in the operation for the first time under the leadership of such an old man. So before the operation started, he asked to let him talk about his rules. It's a long trip, almost 100,000 miles round trip. All routes are already booked. No one is allowed to leave the crew or come into contact with outsiders. Even if something happens, you have to report to him first, and if no one can fulfill that, he can leave now. But if everyone waits to start, let them not accuse him of being unfriendly. Our hero immediately pointed out that discipline and cooperation are very important when working as a team in the wilderness, and this leader is very dangerous. And the man concluded his speech by saying that if no one had any objections, we could proceed with the show of force and get acquainted. People took turns introducing themselves and talking about their strengths. When the turn came to the manager, he reported that he was a high-level driver, specialized in using swords with medium ball improvement talent and low metal talent. Everyone recognized that he possessed a rare dual talent. And then with a kind of mockery, he inquired what power our hero possessed. The guy reported possessing an intermediate-level warrior specialized in the use of swords. People also marveled at such recklessness, because if with the strength of an average warrior, he could become a member of the Trade Alliance, and this mission is very dangerous, the guy can't even defend himself with such strength. The manager, flashing his evil eyes, summed up the majority opinion that the guy didn't belong there, and therefore he should probably leave, because this operation goes through 2 bases. And it's a long way. And if something happens to him, he's unlikely to be rescued by anyone. The girl tried to say that our hero was in no danger, because his village had been evaluated by the Trade Alliance, and he was quite capable of handling this mission. The guy still thought our hero was a fraud. The young man tried to find out what this malcontent meant, but the guy tried to explain on his fingers that it's simple. Our hero can't defeat him, then let him not even stutter about joining this mission. Our hero at that very second felt a rush of excitement, so did not hesitate a second to agree to such a condition. The rest of the mission cleared a space for the fight and watched with some tension. The girl decided to share what she knew about Manager Zhang, that he had recently overtaken the Swordlight realm and ordinary warlords could not defeat him. The man standing next to him confirmed this and said that the sword was made of special steel. But the mission leader, thinking that Mrs. Mo was worried, tried to calm her down by saying that he would keep a close eye on the battle and would not let the manager seriously injure our hero. The girl immediately refuted the false speculation of the leader, for he knew that if Zhang Xuan had reached the realm of Swordlight, he would not be able to match Chu Mo's comprehension of sword power. During the battle, the manager still doubted the courage of our hero, but assured him that he would lose anyway. The young man just stood there for a while, dodging the sword. The man didn't understand what was going on yet. You could tell by the look in his eyes. The moment the young man turned around, he realized that several thin, like hairball energy had detached from the sword. If it wasn't for the fact that his eyes were able to see at the speed of sound, he wouldn't have been able to dodge those needles even if he had dodged the sword. Our hero's blood vessels could have been shredded because this heartless guy can't be contained, in which case he decided to act. Those watching didn't understand why our hero had stopped. The man grinned evilly, for our hero did not know that there was something else hidden in his enemy's ball. Having reached the realm of light, the metal talent could channel the energy to penetrate the human body like a steel needle, tearing all his vessels inside the body. The manager was not going to stop, so he even shouted during his attacks. At this time, our hero's energy was accumulating in his hand. A moment later, Chu Mo had already grabbed his enemy's sword. The steel under his onslaught began to crack. The sword wielder couldn't believe what was happening, but the young man crushed the weapon without any effort in the blink of an eye, and so they stood still, even as the lightning raged around them. The mission leader couldn't utter a word. Our hero crushed the battle sword with one hand. Manager Zhang started stuttering. Our hero with final courage raised his sword, thus demonstrating all his power. The guy was really very scared and didn't know about our hero's plans concerning him. Our hero's strength lay in his ability to wield a sword with dexterity, and this time the guy did an incredible amount of damage to his enemy. After a moment, he collapsed to the ground completely unmoving but still conscious. The picture was repeated. They again stood in the clearing surrounded by the rest of the expedition, only this time the manager was lying still. The supervisor noticed that the guy is still alive, but all his blood vessels are damaged, so now he's disabled. No one could believe that the peak warlord couldn't compare to choose participant, and some people were unsurprised that the guy was able to become a participant at the average warrior level. After all, he really is an extraordinary person. Mrs. Mo clapped her hands in joy, because now no one had any doubts about our hero's strength. After the fight, 4 days passed, and our hero was already on his way with his comrades almost to the other side of the world. The leader of these daredevils was undeterred, and at the same time benevolent. Having found a suitable place to sleep, he ordered his subordinates not to build fires, so as not to attract the attention of the beasts of light, and every 2 hours groups should patrol the area. The girl who had lost an eye was glad that everything had gone smoothly, for very soon they must reach their appointed base, and on this journey they were able to avoid 80% of the ferocious beasts. The other participants confirmed that they were glad to be on Old Man Kian's team. But after a moment, only smoking ashes remained of the guy. No one could utter a word. People were surprised and scared at the same time, because no one knew what was happening. Our hero immediately noticed something wrong and ordered everyone to take care of themselves. But everything that was happening was very strange, because the air was completely unshakable. The trajectory of the attack could not be felt. The supervisor ordered at that second that no one panic. All the people were ready to start a battle with the unknown at any second. But this unknown person was striking so quietly and stealthily that only streaks of light directed towards certain people were visible. The person hit by the light line exploded a few seconds later. The girl screamed in an instant and reported that she had noticed a kind of white shadow before the explosion. And already in this instant, our hero from another attack. He was very surprised that the unknown creature appeared with his back to him. In a second, the leader became afraid. Because everything was very bad, a bursting white weasel appeared. Our hero did his best to fight. Some people were not even able to notice the movement of this beast. The men had a panic attack, for bursting white weasels can travel in space. But after a little bit of recuperation, everyone realized there was no need to panic. The leader tried to cheer up his subordinates with something that it was just a ferocious level 3 middle grade beast. Before it found flaws and wiped out everyone one by one, people had a chance. It is only necessary to be careful. You need to place one person facing outward and the other inward, thus forming a circle. The young man realized in a moment that the leader was really experienced, and such a position allowed for maximum observation in all directions. But still something was missing. In an instant, our hero's attention was caught by one of his comrades, who was struck by a pillar of light. And after a couple more moments, someone threw his heart next to his dead comrade. And at this point, our hero became uncomfortable, because to tear out the heart, but not for the sake of prey, was very strange, as if weasel teased them. In an instant, an incredible number of portals appeared from which people were struck time and time again, causing them to lose their hearts. The supervisor was still trying to calm his subordinates, because the more everyone panicked, the more likely it was that all the attackers would take advantage of it. The group of people were still standing in the clearing, and some were already dead, but nothing at all happened for a while. Losing her eye in an instant, she reported seeing the weasel, but she was too fast. There was no time to attack, and it made her incredibly angry. In a moment, one of the men completely lost himself from panic, was about to do the unimaginable. The guy started to attract affection. This behavior was unacceptable for further survival. His co-workers tried to stop him, but it was all in vain. The guy was already enveloped in purple light. And after that, there was a hole in his chest. At this second, our hero realized that it was time to apply the second-level ghost step. Everyone was amazed at the guy's actions, for he chopped up a ripping white weasel, and very quickly at that. Your young man shouted to his colleagues that the beast was only wounded, thus reducing the speed level, so we still need to be very careful. Thereupon, one of the young men hastened to summon our hero. The guy didn't wait for the end of the sentence and rushed towards his co-worker. And after that, he began to fight with an incredible fast beast. The other participants now and then prompted from which side to expect an attack. Everything was happening so fast that the girl without an eye could not see what or who was doing. For every time a bursting white weasel appeared, she never leaves her prey, unless that one is dead. The young man realized that Weasel was wounded and her speed had decreased, so now she must be looking for an opportunity to strike. If she was bold, then her next target would definitely be him, so this was a chance to kill the beast. The white weasel was already behind our hero, who prepared to attack. The beast did fly with its mouth open to eat, but our hero managed to find himself right next to the neck of this ferocious beast, and then without a second's hesitation, an unpleasantly powerful blow, after which he leaped victoriously to the ground. No one could believe what had happened, because when you meet a torn white weasel, almost no one survives below the level of patriarch, and our hero really killed. And in that second, the mission leader realized that if he met our hero, he would definitely not survive. The young man realized that the leader had a really sharp eye, and it was lucky that such a person was on the side of the Jade Trade Alliance, who in turn thanked our hero for saving his life. After a brief conversation, the man decided to declare our hero as Chu's older brother. This time they were able to survive thanks to our hero, so let him deal with all the ripping white weasels. And our hero was only too happy to be honored. After a while, the young people were already at the Changfeng base. They wandered through the spacious and completely empty streets, but the leader still wondered why no one had come to greet him, since he had informed the base before his arrival that he would be there shortly. Our hero also wondered, for according to the stories, this base was supposed to be bigger than the one he had served a long time on. As they went further into the base, the young people did not let go of the feeling that something strange was going on there. In an instant, the master was called out by someone. It was a slightly chubby man rushing to meet him and apologizing for keeping him waiting. But it was unclear to the master why Lao Sun had only arrived with 2 servants, and the man was still trying to catch his breath after a long run. Later, taking his hand, the man tried to thank him for his good work, so he would ask someone to take everyone to the inn at Jade House. The boy whispered in the master's ear that he would take care of the treasure data transfer that needed to be escorted, and the master told his subordinates that he was going to rest. At this time, our hero realized that the bursting white weasel was only a ferocious level 3 beast, but it had inflicted almost crushing damage to the team led by the warlord. It was all thanks to his natural ability to move in space. If our hero could gather it, his strength would certainly increase. And in that very second, the young man began to gather all his power and energy. After that came the merger process. The system informed our hero that the spatial perception ability had been activated. The young man was surprised to see everything around him very, very clearly. It's the ability for spatial perception. One can clearly perceive within a radius of 50 meters, but did not understand what ability breaks through space and transports itself like a tearing white caress. The young man decided to try out this new ability after all, and a moment later, he was already enjoying a breakthrough through space. Once in the tree and grabbing the bird, the young man was immensely satisfied with this ability. That can instantly teleport to any point of perception through a spatial rift. Spatial perception allows for detection and location, and spatial rift allows for instantaneous movement. This is a talent, both offensive and defensive. Comrades saw our hero in the tree and asked him what he forgot there. After that, the young man immediately jumped off, reporting that all was very much in order. The supervisor informed our hero that everything was ready, and so they could depart the next day. And a man standing nearby assumed that our hero was the supervisor. The man laughed. Well, then he said that he was a member of the Jade House, and he had already reached the middle level of a warrior, so he was considered a real pride. This guy couldn't believe it, because to be a mid-level warrior, you have to be extremely talented and have a bright future. The young man thought this assistant was very kind, and so he dared to ask a question. He was curious about what had happened at the base, and warned that it would not be a big deal if he didn't get an answer. The man grimaced and replied that it would be very difficult for him to talk about it, but there was no reason to hide it. But before the man could finish his story, something suddenly began to happen. An unknown monster appeared, from which people ran away in terror. Our hero was incredibly angry, because it was a beast of the 3rd level, a dragon with a broad-bladed back. On every base sits patriarchy and patrols warriors. And here something was wrong, and perhaps the base was out of order. At this time, that monster was already too close by and glared with its horrible eyes. The monster was about to eat a little crying girl calling for help from her mom. Our hero could not allow a terrible exodus, therefore in a moment rushed from his seat. And a second did not pass, as our hero was next to the monster and struck him a blow to thwart his plans. This caused the monster to become even more enraged. In the meantime, the leader grabbed the girl, and our hero considered his next steps. After a couple seconds, shifted and leapt to meet the horrible thing. The man who met our heroes told the group leader that among the ferocious beasts of the 3rd level, it is very difficult to cope with the humpback dragon, and our hero is claimed to be only a middle-class driver, and therefore unlikely to be able to overpower this creature, but the commander assured him otherwise. Our hero is an unusual middle-class driver, so will certainly cope with this dragon. In an instant, This block of stone turned its rear end toward the humans to strike with its tail. But the young man decided to apply the second-level ghost step. The guy was riding the back of this behemoth now and then. He moved with such speed that his soul and body seemed to separate from each other. And after a while, the monster realized what was going on, so he started wriggling. Chuso was waiting for the right moment to strike a fatal blow. People watching our hero's actions tried to warn him of the coming danger. But the young man was already as careful as the situation allowed. He tried to win regardless of the consequences. And then he began to deliver one crushing blow after another. The fierce dragon was certainly not going to give up, so now and then tried to throw himself off our hero. Later, the young man shouted, thus warning of an impending attack. And then he rose up from the sword, concentrating all his power in his sword, and headed straight for the creature's mouth.